getting going with our workshop, the Wednesday afternoon agenda. But before we get going, I wanted to welcome the new members who are with us today, Juan Marcano, Elise Jones, and Barbara McLaughlin on the internet. And I wonder if it wouldn't be helpful to take a tip from Vice Chair Gutierrez at CTIO, who had us go around the room to introduce ourselves so that you can get an idea of who's here as well. So I'll start with Terry Hart.
Hi, I'm Terry Hart. I'm the immediate past chair of the Transportation Commission. I'm from Pueblo. I represent District 10, which is the 10 counties to the southeastern side of the state. I've been on the Transportation Commission for about 4 years now. And prior to that, I served as a county commissioner. Worked quite a bit with Elise over the years in that capacity as CCI. And prior to that, I was the county attorney from Pueblo. And so welcome. Todd?
Todd Masters, Commissioner for District 11 out in Eastern Colorado. And I've only been on the commission about 6 months, so I'm as new as you.
Hi, Cecil Gutierrez, and Commissioner from District 5, which is Larimer, Weld, and Morgan County. Been on the commission for 6 years, but currently serve as the vice chair of CTIO, and have been on CTIO for 6 years. So, welcome.
I'm Rick Ritter, Commissioner District 6, which ranges from just about west of Evergreen in Gilpin County. Turn myself off, yep. All the way up to Dinosaur and Moffett, 268 miles. Come visit.
Just commissioners?
No, you also.
Okay. Paul DeRocher, I'm the director of the Division of Transit and Rail. We'll have an informational item for you later. Welcome to the commission.
Marcia Nelson, Chief Equity Officer, overseeing the Environmental Justice and Equity Branch.
Sally Chafee, CDOT Chief of Staff.
Hello, everybody. Very excited to be here with you all. Juan Marcano, I'm the new District 3 Commissioner. So that's going to be Arapahoe County and Douglas. Very excited to be representing part of the city that I used to represent as the City Council member for Ward 4 on the City Council of Aurora, Colorado. My day job now is with New American Leaders. I'm the National Director of Governance Programs there. I help educate existing folks in office all across the country on various public policy areas. So very excited to be here because transportation is one of my personal passions. So thank you all so much.
Elise Jones here, District 4. I'm taking over from Karen Stewart. And thanks so much for the warm welcome. I have sat in this room before as a member of the STAC committee back when I was a Boulder County Commissioner for 8 years. I currently am the executive director of a nonprofit Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, or SWEEP, which works on climate solutions around the Southwest region, including clean transportation. So I'm delighted to continue my service to Colorado, working on transportation with all of you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, new commissioners. I'm Jessica Holguin. I am the outgoing District 1 Commissioner for the City of Denver. It's been such a pleasure, and we're just really sad. I was invited to come for one last meeting, and I happily accepted because it was still in my calendar. And so thank you all for having me.
I'm Gary Beatty, Chair of the STAC, Statewide Transportation Advisory Committee, which is all the planning regions of the state that work with CDOT to coordinate transportation planning statewide for all the needs of the people. I'm from the Eastern TPR, which is the Northeast 9 counties, which includes I-76 and I-70 and all the state highways in that region. I guess you got it.
Good afternoon. I'm Jessica Mickelbust. I'm the Regional Director for Region 1, which falls within District 3 and District 4. So I look forward to getting to know Commissioner Marcano and Commissioner Jones a lot better. So welcome.
Hello, I'm Jason Smith. I'm the Director for Region 3, which is the northwest corner of the state. Hello, my name is Shane Ferguson. I'm in Region 2, which is the southeast corner of the state.
Good afternoon, Bob Hayes, Deputy Chief Engineer for CDOT.
Good afternoon, Sean Smith. I'm the Director for the Division of Maintenance and Operations.
And I'm Heather Paddock, the Regional Transportation Director for Region 4, which is the northeast quadrant of the state. And Commissioner Jones, I'll be reaching out soon to set up some time to work with you.
Good afternoon, Jeff Sudmeyer, Chief Financial Officer.
Hello, Bethany Nicholas, Deputy Chief Financial Officer.
And I am Julie Constant. I am the Regional Director for the southwest corner of the state.
Hello, Keith Stefanik, CDOT Chief Engineer.
Good afternoon, Darius Pockbaz, the Director of the Division of Transportation Development, which includes our planning, environmental programs, and transportation analytics programs.
Herman Stockinger, CDOT's Deputy Director and the Secretary to the Transportation Commission.
Patrick? Oh, you guys don't have microphones back there. Well, okay, we'll catch you when you come up, probably, okay? And Frank, go ahead.
Yes, hi. Frank Spinelli, Audit Director.
And I didn't mention my district. District 2, which is really just Jeffco, but a little bit of Broomfield as well. And welcome, really happy to have you. A very strong group joining us here, so. Oh, yes, forgive me. And wanted to pivot to the people online. Vice Chair Bowman, please.
Welcome new commissioners. Thank you. I apologize. I'll be with you next month. And I represent District 7, which is 11 counties and basically goes, think Summit County all the way to Uray. So, you know, quite a large county. Look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
And thank you. And new Commissioner Barbara McLaughlin.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be a part of this. I've been a state representative for 8 years from Durango, and I've represented most of the states that are in my new district, and I'm looking forward to meeting everybody in the other half of it. So yeah, so thank you for having me. Thanks.
Welcome. Commissioner Hannah Parsons.
Hi, welcome everyone. Sorry I can't be there in person. I represent District 9, which is El Paso County, Park County, Teller, and Fremont counties. So I'm looking forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to the first item on our agenda, we've got a budget workshop, and that'll be presented by Jeff Sudmeyer and Bethany Nicholas, who just introduced themselves as CFO and Deputy CFO for CDOT. And we pretty much keep these informal. I mean, so you should feel free to ask questions and so forth, but we may hold off until the end of a presentation in order for you to do that. So go ahead, please.
Good afternoon. We've got a few slides at the beginning that I wanted to provide some context, in particular for our new commissioners. We did have the opportunity to provide some orientation to two of the new commissioners this morning. So appreciate having the chance to meet and chat. But so I'll try to be brief on these first couple of slides, since it will be a little bit of a repeat for what we discussed in orientation. But if we could advance, Jamie. So Bethany is going to do most of the heavy lifting today. I'm going to do just a couple slides providing some context on the budget and the Division of Accounting and Finance. And then we'll spend the bulk of the workshop reviewing the first budget amendment of this fiscal year. That budget amendment includes a couple of items that relate to syncing up the fiscal year 26 budget that took effect on July 1 with final actions coming out of the legislature. There's also an element that involves transferring some funds from Bridge and Tunnel Enterprise and backfilling some prior reductions to asset management. And then there's a contingency request related to some hail damage on some CDOT facilities. So Bethany is going to walk you through those amendments momentarily, and then we'll request approval of those amendments at the meeting tomorrow. Next slide, please. So again, just to provide a little bit of background for the benefit of new commissioners, as Chief Financial Officer, I am over the Division of Accounting and Finance. That is off to the left of the CDOT org chart. And over on the right, you can see the primary groups making up the Division of Accounting and Finance, the Office of Financial Management and Budget, Center for Accounting, our Procurement and Contract Services Group, a business office supporting the headquarters divisions and enterprises, and then a business technology branch that supports our business systems. I will say that with respect to the commission, the group you primarily interact with is the Office of Financial Management and Budget. Let's go to the next slide. So we are entering busy season for the budget, and also I will say confusing season, because we're entering kind of the point of the year where we often are dealing in 3 different fiscal years at once. So not going to go through this slide in full detail, but just to sort of orient you, we are going to be reviewing an amendment today to the fiscal year 26 budget. That will be the budget that took effect on July 1. The development of that budget started all the way back last fall, and you can see the timeline for the budget development on the screen in front of you. So around September of each year, we start building the budget for the fiscal year that will begin the following July 1. And so today we're going to be workshopping an amendment to that fiscal year 26 budget. But in the next few months, you will see us start the process to develop the fiscal year 27 budget. So as noted at the bottom, we do, aside from the process of developing next fiscal year budget, we are actively working with the commission to manage the budget for the current fiscal year. So on a monthly basis, typically a monthly basis, we will be before the commission reviewing budget amendments, which are changes, programmatic changes to the budget, and budget supplements, which are budget project level actions. You will see, again, the workshop today is focused on a budget amendment, but you will see in tomorrow's meeting a budget supplement request. We generally bring those supplement requests to you just in the formal meeting. So let's go on to the next slide. As I said, Bethany is going to do, back one please. Bethany's going to do the heavy lifting here, so I'm going to hand it over to her and she's going to walk you through the budget amendment.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so to get into the details a little bit, this slide just provides a summary. So I have slides to each of these items, but wanted to give you an overview of the topics today. So as Jeff mentioned, the first 2 lines are related to kind of making sure our fiscal year 26 budget aligns with what came out of the legislative session ending in May. So the first item, Senate Bill 257, modify general fund transfers. There was a difference in what we had adopted in our budget against what the final legislation included of $3.8 million. And so we'll have an item to request a reduction of $3.8 million to the 10-year plan multimodal line. Senate Bill 258, this line actually is kind of an interplay between the impacts of Senate Bill 258 and also Senate Bill 320. Senate Bill 258 temporarily reduced the road safety surcharge, resulting in some decreases to asset management and faster safety programs. But we also had Senate Bill 320, which accelerated some fees that allowed additional revenue to come to the Bridge and Tunnel enterprise. So we have a proposal to review that would see $15 million come into the CDOT budget, of which we would use those funds to return asset management to the levels it was prior to that reduction. And then there's a leftover amount of $7.9 million, which we're proposing to put into the commission program reserve line for now. And then kind of, we can take a look at that again as we enter the fiscal year end activities that we bring to you in September, as we try to balance out where we ended the year with revenue and roll forwards and all of that. And so we'll have a little bit of funding there in the reserve that we can keep in mind when we bring that to you in a couple months. The final item is a request from property management. There was some hail damage at some various facilities, and they do have a slide deck in the packet that they'll be going through with you to kind of talk about their request for $2.3 million to help fund the repair of some of that damage. I do want to mention PD 703 as I talk about these items for the new commissioners, just to point out there is a policy directive that has very detailed instructions that staff follow for every single budget transaction that tells us what level of approval it requires. So there are certain items that staff will complete, just to facilitate operations. There are certain items that the executive management team will review. And then the items that we bring to the Transportation Commission are those things that are very, are higher risk or of higher policy importance. And it's detailed in the policy. Typically, those things are in excess of $1 million or something that's of interest, like everything 10-year plan we bring to you. So just wanted to mention that so you kind of understand why we're bringing these types of things to you and not certain other things. So next slide. This is also one thing I wanted to touch on before I get into the details. It's just a reconciliation of the Commission's program reserve balance. So we're going to be requesting some actions today that will impact that. So I just kind of wanted to let you know what that balance looks like. So beginning fiscal year 26, coming into the new fiscal year, we had 47.2 million in the Commission reserve. There are some staff adjustments that happened, totaling 4.2 million. So about 300,000 of that is due to common policy changes. Staff completes those because there's no control point for us. So that's within that 4.2. And then the other 3.9 million of that was actually residual state highway fund that was left when we balanced and adopted the FY26 budget. So right now that money is just placed in the program reserve. So that 4.2 is being added to the balance there. And then the next item, budget amendment, restore funds to the asset management. I mentioned that on the previous slide. So if the Commission chooses to approve the resolution, it would result in that 7.9 million going to the program reserve balance. And then finally, if you approve transferring funds to property management, that's a negative 2.3, leaving us with 56.9 million in the program reserve balance. So I just wanted to let you know where we're at. That.
And just real quick for the benefit of new commissioners, there are essentially two reserve funds that the commission has. There's a contingency, which is primarily funds set aside for emergencies, like a rock slide, for example. And then there's the program reserve, which is what we're talking about here. The reserve is sort of the non-emergency account, but it is sort of a reserve fund for unanticipated needs. It is also sort of our balancing account or clearing account when we have to reconcile revenue, where we are able to sort of take positive and negative adjustments as actual revenues come in more or less than budgeted.
Go ahead, Commissioner Rader.
How does that compare to previous years at 56.9, given that we're at the end of the cycle and the beginning?
Yeah. I would say that's probably in the ballpark of, we don't have a hard target for the reserve. We do for the contingency, but I think as sort of rule of thumb, we go through the revenue reconciliation process in the fall, which means that number goes up or down, typically in October. And we like to come out of that October process with maybe making sure we at least have something around 40 million is sort of an informal target. So.
Thank you.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so into the details. So Senate Bill 257, this is the legislation that modified general fund transfers to the State Highway Fund. So Senate Bill 21260 had laid out 8 years or multiple years of transfers. You can see in the table on the bottom, $100 million a year beginning in FY25 through FY29 and then shifting down in those subsequent years. This legislation changed those transfers. So what happened is when we adopted the budget in March, we had included what our request was in the budget amendment paperwork that we had submitted with the governor's request. And that was a $36 million transfer. However, when the legislation passed, that got changed to a $32.2 million transfer. So what we're requesting is to adjust the budget by $3.8 million to reconcile to the way the legislation was passed in the end. And that decrease would come from the 10-year plan projects multimodal budget line 46. It comes from the 10-year plan because that's where general fund got budgeted to. And in particular, the multimodal line, because that's where the general fund is available. The other lines don't have enough to be able to pull that amount. So that's just kind of a reconciliation true-up item that we're requesting. Next slide. Or next slide. Senate Bill 258, this temporarily reduced the road safety surcharge. So it reduced it by $3.70 for every vehicle weight class. Initially, the legislation and the request was to begin that on July 1st. However, as the bill was going through session, we learned from the Department of Revenue that they wouldn't be able to make the system changes on July 1st due to some technical issues, and then that would have to be delayed a couple months. So what that means is the dollar amount is going to be different for fiscal year 26. So you can kind of see that progression in the table on the bottom. If you want to walk through kind of, here's, those revenues go to the Faster Safety Program and to asset management in that 60-40 split that you see there. So you can see maybe what we had for those programs in FY25, the original forecast, the BA01, that's short for budget amendment, which is what CDOT submitted to the legislature or what the governor's office submitted to the legislature. That's what's adopted in our budget. And then there's a column there to show you what that reduction math looks like. Senate Bill 258, the final number is different. So, we're just requesting to go ahead and make those changes to the one sheet budget to make sure that we align with the legislation. And if you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So this shows you in more detail those lines and where the adjustments would be made. You can see the asset management lines and, those first four there, and then the faster safety line. And so, this results in a negative 17.8 million total reduction. Next slide. Okay, so this relates to Senate Bill 320. And so I mentioned this earlier, but that bill accelerated the fee structure that provides revenue to the Bridge and Tunnel Enterprise. And so what we're proposing is to suspend a $15 million transfer of flexible federal funds that CDOT has been sending to the Bridge and Tunnel Enterprise to cover debt service on a couple of their bonds, because now they have funding from Senate Bill 320 that can offset that. So it'll be a pretty minimal impact to the Bridge and Tunnel Enterprise, and that would allow us to backfill the asset management program so that they aren't seeing that cut from that previous legislation. There is a residual of 7.9 that I mentioned, 7.9 million that would go into the commission reserve funds. But this is before you for review and approval if you're supportive of that. Next slide. Okay, switching gears out of legislation, and I'll mention this, but like I said, property management does have a slide deck and they'll go into more detail. But they do have a request to pull 2.3 million from the commission reserve to do some repairs to some damaged facilities due to hail. They do have an estimate of some insurance reimbursement, but for various reasons, they either need the funding up front or the insurance may not completely cover that. But like I said, I won't go into too much detail because they'll go into a lot more for you on that topic. And then I just have 3 more slides after this that I kind of want to provide some informational updates, and then I'll hand it back to property management to cover that topic. So next slide. So kind of back to PD 703, the items I just went through are for commission approval. These items have been adjusted. They're staff adjustments, but I just want to give it to you informationally so you have awareness. So we did make some updates to other budget lines to reflect final appropriations and the long bill that was passed. And there is an attachment in your packet if you want to see more detail in the one sheet that I gave you. But administration line 67, we reduced that by 0.3 million. And that was just to align with what was adopted in the long bill. Also, we had requested some additional spending authority for the multimodal options program, and we had anticipated that and built it into our budget, but the Joint Budget Committee did not approve that. So we need to reduce that appropriation to reflect what was approved by the Joint Budget Committee. And you can see those figures in the table on the bottom. Next slide. One other item that happened this past session, Senate Bill 257 changed not only those general fund transfers I mentioned before, but also removed a $7 million annual general fund transfer that was going to the Revitalizing Main Streets program. So we need to change the budget to remove that $7 million since we won't be receiving that anymore. Next slide. Okay, final slide. Well, and I just kind of wanted to give you a heads up. There are a couple of changes happening in the enterprises that once the enterprises adopt those, then we will go make those changes in the CDOT budget. So for Bridge and Tunnel Enterprise from Senate Bill 320, I mentioned that additional revenue. So, you know, that revenue impact is about 14 million. And this will be incorporated into the revenue allocation plan once the board adopts that amended budget on the bridge and tunnel side. For Clean Transit Enterprise, they also had, because they have an annually appropriated fund, they had a request for some spending authority as well. And so, you know, we had initially included 12.9 million in forecasted revenue in FY26. And I'm having trouble reading the slide. And 36.2 million that the JBC approved. They approved that additional spending authority. So that change, once the enterprise makes that change, we'll make that change on the CDOT budget side. And I think that is my last slide. And Jamie, if you want to pull up the second slide deck, I will switch out and allow Hope to talk to you about the property management request. Oh, you're over there? Excellent.
Hi there. My name is Hope Wright. I'm with Property Management, and I'm here to talk a little bit more about our request from the TC Program Reserve. Next slide.
Please.
So the agenda, we'll just walk through what happened on May of 2024 to several of our buildings. I can talk about the delays in the insurance and then a little bit more about the total request. Next slide. So last May, we had several buildings at our KOA facility. It's at 18500 East Colfax in Aurora. Actually, all the buildings on the site were damaged by hail, every single roof. So obviously, we have an interest in getting those repaired. We also had some loss at our Ray and Yuma facilities. Those were separate storms, but significant nonetheless. We have been working with risk, state risk, CDOT risk, and the insurance provider, the insurance carrier, over the last year to try to get those funds to complete those repairs. And essentially what we've been told is that we need to fund those repairs up front, and then we will be reimbursed for a portion or maybe all of the work. Unfortunately, we do not have the funds in our budget at this point for those repairs, which is the reason for the request today. Next slide. So total right now between Ray and Yuma, we're about $81,000 short. The carrier did provide some upfront funding for that, which is $659,000. The $81,000 is our request for that portion. That portion would not be repaid to the TC reserve because that is the total portion that the carrier has agreed to pay out as the $659,000. However, bids came in at $740,000. So the request for Ray and Yuma is $81,000. And then the next slide. The KOA facility in Aurora, again, the carrier has only agreed to reimburse CDOT for the construction costs up to the insured value, and that's once construction is complete. So our ask today is $2.2 million to repair all 21 buildings that were damaged at KOA. The importance of this request is that if we don't make these repairs, we are basically exempt from asking the insurance carrier for any future revenues should the buildings ever be damaged again. So it is in our best interest to get these buildings repaired. And again, that money would be, a portion of that would be reimbursed by the carrier, and that would come back to the Transportation Commission. Next slide. I don't know if you guys want me to read through the statute, but basically we are self-insured, but we do have a carrier. And I think it feels like a little bit in this instance, it's like, why bother having insurance? But that's beside the point. They have agreed to reimburse us in the end for a portion, but we do just need help with the upfront costs. And then this piece, I'm going to have to read through this. Sorry, this was a last minute ask that I present this. I don't know if Zsofia can speak more to this one. I'm not really sure what this one is saying. Basically, I think it's saying that they don't insure coverage. I'm struggling with this one. I'll have to get back to you on this slide. I apologize. Yeah, Zsofia. These two slides are really risk, so we'll have Zsofia speak to those.
Hello, everyone. My name is Zsófi Porter. I am the risk manager for CDOT. We have been negotiating with the State Office of Risk Management for a year now about this, and we have been requesting them to actually prepay. We have told them that there is no funding in property management, and we got the response that the way that the State Office of Risk Management manages the insurance fund for the whole state is that you have to repair your damages within 2 years actually after the initial onset of the damage, and then they are going to reimburse you after you have already funded for your own the replacement of your damage. We have for VRI and UMA, I asked the State Office of Risk Management if they can pre-fund it, and the state risk manager actually just told me, yes, we can do that. They required us to have a contract in place before they would actually give us the money. And when we actually told them that in order to have a contract in place, you have to have the funding behind it, that was when they realized that, you know, this pre-funding should actually be coming before the contract is in place, and they did accept the bid for VRI and UMA, but when it came down to KOA, they just said that they will be going back to the way that they have been handling the insurance claim, which is that they only reimburse after the claim has been, or after the damage has been repaired. So I don't know if there is any questions about that.
Yeah, well, why don't we see if we have any questions about the entire presentation now? Just go ahead and open it up there. Jessica Holguin? Yeah.
Thank you for the overview. And I'll be honest, I was quite confused when I read. I had an understanding that it was self-insured, but there's an insurance carrier. What are the pieces that are covered through the insurance carrier? And I guess just recognizing that it seems like hailstorms are now becoming the norm. Is this something that we should be budgeting for moving forward?
So the State Office of Risk Management does not share the insurance policies or anything about any of the insurance programs with the state agencies. There are several state agencies that I know that do not have a dedicated risk management team who are actually familiar with insurance. And per statute, and I can't recall the statute number off the top of my head, it was actually like, you know, legislator that created the State Office of Risk Management to manage all of the risks for the entire state of Colorado and all of its agencies. Some of the non-industry standard applications that I have seen, and all of these are, I can only say that from personal experience, since I have not been allowed to look at any policies, insurance policies. So we are putting together what the insurance coverages are based on their responses. And their responses are that we have to actually fix all of our damages within 2 years of the occurrence. Otherwise, we are foregoing the ability to claim. There is actually a 10%, I call it haircut, if we are not reporting a claim or not reporting a loss in a timely manner. And then the fact that it's a reimbursement-based policy. We are being told that there is a pool. A pool is an insurance form where it's essentially people that have similar exposure. They just pool a bunch of money together. And then there should be some rules. If somebody out of that pool, if one member of that pool actually has a loss, then they can go into the pool and then they pay out the money. But so many times this pool is not enough money. So you actually go out into the insurance market and you procure coverage for the top layers. So essentially what I am assuming, again, this is just assumption, is that probably for our lower layers, we are self-insured. And then on the higher layers, we actually procure insurance from just regular insurance companies that you might be familiar with. Like not necessarily regular, but like, Zurich, Travelers, Chubb, all of those insurance companies that you might be familiar with.
Yeah. Kind of a stop loss meeting. Terry Hart, go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead.
You mean first? Well, thank you for those answers, but I'm with Commissioner Holguin. I read this and I said, what? And I read it and I said, what? And, this may be cheating on my part, but we helped form when I was a county commissioner, well, previous to that, when I was a county attorney, we formed a self-insurance pool for the statewide for all counties in the state. And I ended up being a representative from my county and ended up being elected the president of that self-insurance pool for about 25 years. And so frankly, I was really surprised to read this because it seemed to me like there's a number of problems in this. Like Commissioner Holguin says, things like fire damage and hail damage is something that I think that we should be planning for because it is probable that that is going to happen on a regular basis every season. And I think it already does. And then the second side is I was a little surprised to hear that, that it sounded like we have had a little bit of a challenge getting an estimate of what maybe some of the values of our various buildings are. And I didn't know what it would take in order to kind of come up to speed to make sure that we internally are doing the best we can, at least on an annual basis, to keep up with the value of those so that when we then turn around and insure it, whether it's through a self-insurance policy or whether it's sub-insured or excess insured in some other fashion, that we basically have coverage. So when we have a damage, it's no different from if our home was damaged. You have a damage, you turn in the claim, it's determined what the value is, whether it's to replace it as an existing value or the cost of replacing it, whatever the heck it is. And then that is simply processed. The other thing that really disturbed me in reading all this stuff was that we have a state agency that, according to this report, has certain policies and we're not allowed to look at them. And I'm thinking, first of all, I think that they're probably public record, for God's sakes. And secondly, one state agency not sharing information with another state agency. I have to tell you, I was blown away by this entire conversation. I feel for you, the folks who are trying to work your way through some of this Byzantine mess that seems to be here. But honestly, what it looks like is a Byzantine mess. And frankly, I'm hoping that we can figure out if there's something we need to do from the Transportation Commission to assist with trying to get to the bottom line to say, okay, here's the series of problems that we've had. We want to get this fixed for the future. If that is at the CDOT level and not the TC, then that's fine. I don't want to overstep our bounds or anything, but I definitely would like to say, shouldn't we be taking a look at this and shouldn't we fix it? So if we have these damages, well, let me change that. When we have these damages in the future, we simply turn in what has occurred and we are reimbursed. And if we are required to carry a portion of it as some kind of a supplement that we would cover, a self-insured element that we would cover, that's fine. We simply build that into our into our budget, but I'm with Commissioner Holguin. I was really blown away with this entire conversation. And again, my sympathy to you for trying to work your way through it.
Thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner Gutierrez.
Yes, I think Jeff would like to maybe add something here before I ask my question. It might clarify what
Yeah,
I
I just wanted to kind of bring us back a little bit. I think I think good questions. I do know there are some challenges working with state risk. I think there are some things probably learned from this that we can go back and look at and so sort of say how we can clarify. I do want to clarify though that the expectation is that we do have the coverage here. It is just simply that we have to move on the repairs sooner than we're going to have that resolved. I think that's the bottom line. That's why we need the 2.3 million today, but we do expect that we will see a significant portion of that come back, although we cannot say with certainty what that will be. But when it does come back, it will be returned to the commission. So I just wanted to make that point. I think good questions, good comments. I think those are things we will follow up on. But again, we do have coverage. We are making the request today because we need to move forward with the repairs in advance of the resolution of all of this that we're discussing.
Yeah, Jeff, don't get me wrong. I think that is absolutely what we ought to do. We need to take care of those repairs and get them done quickly. And then we can go ahead and figure out the book side of it. But what bothers me is if we end up getting into this and we have an expense a fairly significant expense that we hadn't anticipated, what it does is it sucks away money for what we're trying to do at the very time we're losing money because of Tabor of the various things we're trying to do. So every time I see a nickel and a dime that's in the nature of a few million here and a few million there, it just kind of makes me a little nervous is all. So thank you.
Real money.
Cecil, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And I appreciate that. I'm trying to bring us back into the item at hand, but I would echo what both of previous commissioners have said, and maybe this is a topic for a future meeting. But my question deals with, is this going to cover every single piece of the repairs, or is this just our upfront cost and the insurance company is actually paying some other pieces of it already? Because it's interesting to me that this is the way we're doing insurance business.
So insurance will not pay until we actually give them the actual invoices of what the repair was. This is my past experience. My past experience is that, as you may know, during the Marshall Fire, we lost Superior. Our building burned down about 80%. And we found out that, unfortunately, the reported value was less than what the repair to that full building was. And at that time, I requested the State Office of Risk Management to just give us the money because you know that the loss is a lot more than what we insured it for. And they still made us count for like every screwdriver and every piece of new siding that we had to put up.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies it. But again, this is for the future, I think, a much greater discussion.
I think Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the dollars that we're asking for will complete the repairs to the buildings we're talking about.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Well, echo some of the comments and appreciate any help you can or move you can make to help resolve some of those questions that we have, because we will see further losses, no doubt. I just would tell the new folks, especially the budget was pretty complicated this year, and we holdovers were able to follow it as it proceeded through the legislature. A lot of work on the part of our staff, Emily Hadaway and Sally Chafee and Shoshana Liu, and we really appreciated it because they were able to soften the impact. It was hard for all the departments, I know, but just appreciated what you did. And I would note that when I've contacted Jeff or Bethany, they've been really responsive. So if you want to go into something in more detail, just, I hope I'm not volunteering you too quickly here, but.
We've made the same offer this morning, so.
Yeah, okay, good. Well, with that, if there are no more questions, we can move on to our next agenda item. And, oh, absolutely, go ahead.
Being new to this, I'm curious,
commissioners made very good points about what seems to be potentially a problem that needs examination. I'm just curious, what's the process for not losing track of that and making sure that CDOT or the right people actually deal with it or bring it back or?
Yeah, usually follows to Herman. Go ahead.
Yeah, we've had some conversations with risk management and our Office of Transportation Safety, which risk management falls under. Our management hasn't reached out to the other agencies' management to express the concerns about not having that, a copy of the insurance policy. We intend to do that. We're working through that. This is just getting a little bit ahead of that conversation, but we're tracking on the same concerns that Commissioner Hart mentioned a couple of minutes ago. And we can report back when we get more info.
Yeah, and on an ongoing basis, Herman would be, as secretary, would be the one who would track those kinds of things, and he's quite good. So, yeah. Okay, so heading into our next agenda item, this is for the Bridge and Tunnel Enterprise. And Patrick Colinda and Katie Carlson, who are managing director and the financial manager, will take that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Cook. Again, wanted to echo the comments earlier, wanted to thank our new directors for the time we spent this morning. It was good to speak with you, get to know you a little bit and give you some background on the enterprise. With that said, similar to what Jeff had mentioned, since we had that opportunity, we did provide some upfront introductory information that may be a bit redundant. So we will touch on that, but not languish on that and get to the meat of the presentation here. So with that, could you please advance to the next slide? So this is our agenda for today. As I mentioned, we'll start off with a brief overview and then dive into our first budget supplement and budget amendment of the year. We'll be bringing these back to the board, requesting your approval tomorrow. Jeff and Bethany did an excellent job of teeing this up for us in terms of how the enterprises plug into the larger overall department-wide budget. But I'll be touching on that a bit as well from the enterprise lens. Next slide, please. So we've provided Bridge and Tunnel Enterprises mission statement here. As we discussed earlier today, our functions are primarily based around addressing our poor-rated bridges throughout the state. Now with an expansion to our statute, we can perform bridge preventative maintenance, complete tunnel projects, and then maintain those bridges that we have addressed in the past. So our mission statement that we have agreed upon with the board in the past is to improve the safety and efficiency of our state transportation system by accelerating the repair, reconstruction, and replacement of poor-rated bridges and repairing, maintaining, and enhancing tunnels in a strategic, timely, and efficient manner using our dedicated fee revenues. Next slide, please. This is our organizational structure, just an introduction to our team and where we fall within the department. Bridge and Tunnel Enterprises in the Office of the Chief Engineer. I oversee a team of 5 full-time equivalents that are responsible for the day-to-day management of the program. We also have a 6th full-time equivalent, our enterprise controller, who serves all of CDOT's enterprises, who is under Jeff's org structure in the Division of Accounting and Finance. Next slide, please. So while the enterprise is under CDOT's umbrella, there are a few attributes that make us unique. As you're aware, we are an autonomous government-owned business with our own board of directors, which is the Transportation Commission, serving as a Type 1 board for the Bridge and Tunnel Enterprise. As we discussed earlier today, we are authorized to impose user fees to provide goods and services to those users. So we have our bridge safety surcharge, which is a registration fee that's applied to vehicles in the state. It ranges from $13 to $32 based on vehicle weight. Our Bridge and Tunnel Impact Fee, which is a fee on special fuels, and our Bridge and Tunnel Retail Delivery Fee on deliveries of tangible personal property. We're authorized to issue revenue bonds with the approval of our board, as well as entering into agreements for loans or grants. And the enterprises do have some exemptions from our state procurement code. Next slide, please. So we included this slide to help provide some context in how the enterprises and CDOT do business and interact with one another. And the reason why some of the things are managed the way they are, because it does seem a bit cumbersome from time to time. So in general, each enterprise is operating as a financially independent entity, which among other things allows us to avoid commingling funds. So as an enterprise, we must receive less than 10% of our annual revenue in gifts or grants from all Colorado state or local governments combined, or we will lose our enterprise status, which in turn would lead to the loss of the ability to issue revenue bonds. Our revenues would no longer be exempt for Tabor, which would have likely budgetary impacts to both the department and the state at large. So I will mention that the federal revenue is exempt from this limit, as that is a topic of our budget amendment on both the CDOT and Bridge and Tunnel enterprise side of the house today. So as we are operating as two financially distinct entities, the transactions between CDOT and the Bridge and Tunnel enterprise are arm's length exchange transactions. So we have two parties acting in their own self-interest, and there's generally some form of agreement that denotes an exchange of items of the same approximate value. So an easy example I can give of this, I mentioned that our controller serves all of the enterprises within CDOT, as well as doing some work for CDOT. So if our controller would work on a project for Jeff, as an example, Bridge and Tunnel Enterprise would actually invoice CDOT for the time she spent on that project. So essentially, we have an agreement that stipulates that, and we're tracking that exchange of two items of approximate value. So just an example, because I know that concept can be a little bit obtuse. And just note that we do closely track our enterprise status. It's something we can take a look at any point in time, but it's formally calculated on a fiscal year basis by both our internal team and the Office of the State Controller. Next slide, please. So before we get into the meat of our budget actions that we will be requesting this month, I want to touch on a few basics related to BTE budget setting and the authority of the board. So first off, our board is empowered to set and adopt on an annual basis a program budget for the Bridge and Tunnel Enterprise and statute. The actions that the Bridge and Tunnel Enterprise takes, as well as the other enterprises, informs the development of the overall department-wide budget, or the one sheet that you have in front of you. So you have the authority to amend and supplement the budget after it has been adopted. We have a procedural directive that points us to Policy Directive 703 for guidance when making adjustments to the program's budget. So Bethany eloquently covered the purpose of PD 703 and the fact that it sets different thresholds at which we have to seek approval from either the board, EMT, or those adjustments that we're able to administratively handle ourselves. There are some exceptions as it relates to the enterprises, and those actually are referenced in PD 703. One example I can give is that in the past, the board has had the desire to have a more intensive level of oversight over Bridge and Tunnel Enterprises budget allocations. So our board actually provides approvals for pre-construction funding as well as construction funding. So there are some differences, but an easy way to think of it is that PD 703 provides the minimum baseline, and then we have a few requirements in addition to that. I also wanted to point out that our PD 16.1 also provides us with guidance on how we prioritize and select projects and bring them to the board for approval. We had the discussion this morning about our board-approved prioritization process. There's a quantitative element to that where we look at our inventory and condition data from our inspection reports. There's a qualitative piece of it where we go out to our region staff and our support units to request feedback on readiness, stakeholder support, funding availability for various projects, level of urgency or safety issues that might not show up in our inspection reports. And then we ultimately do a peer-wise comparison of all of our poor-rated bridges statewide. And all of that's occurring before we bring these requests to the board for approval. Next slide, please. So with that, I will turn the presentation over to Katie to cover the budget amendment. We already had an introduction from DAF discussing SB 25-320 and the transfer of federal funds. So some of this will be duplicative, but it's essentially just a commensurate action that needs to occur on the Bridge and Tunnel Enterprise side of the house. You'll also see a few actions that we're requesting that are a little bit more in the weeds on the programmatic level. So with that, I'll turn it over to Katie.
Thank you, Patrick. So to begin with, I just wanted to mention that or just reiterate what Patrick just said. As the BTE board, you have the authority to amend the budget. So this can occur outside of the annual budget setting process. And Jeff provided us earlier with the definition of what a budget amendment is. So this month, what we're requesting is staff is requesting approval to make several adjustments. So we have 5 in total. We'll walk through each one of them with you. And this is to amend the budget that was approved in March of 2025. Next slide, please. Before we jump in, other direction, thank you. So before we jump into each one of these amendments, I do want to also point out that within your packet, there was a couple of attachments to our memo. One of them in particular might be a little helpful if you want a visual guide. We do have attachment B. So this one will show you side by side what the budget was approved back in March of 2025. So that's the adopted budget. And then it'll also show you the changes that we are requesting today. So you'll be able to see them in one column next to each other. So for the first item, sorry. Okay, so for this one, Bethany gave us a really good overview. We're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive and kind of look at the programmatic side. So for this one, during the legislative 2025 session, Senate Bill 25-320 was passed, and as Bethany explained, it accelerated the phasing in of our bridge and tunnel impact fee. And the table here will walk you through what that means. So you're going to see at the top portion of the table the actual fee rate that changed. The bottom half will show you the actual impact to our revenue. So looking across the table, let's start with row 1. You're going to see where we started under Senate Bill 21-260. So the impact fee actually came from the creation of that bill. For fiscal year 26, which we're in right now, essentially we were at 5 cents. Now, with the passage of Senate Bill 25-320, that increased it up to 7 cents. So that first gray line will show you what the actual new fee rate is. You'll notice that it will start increasing going out through FY28. So in terms of revenue, let's look at the overall impact to the program. Those are going to be the last 3 lines that you see in the table. So essentially what ends up happening is you've got the first line there that shows you the revenue forecast. This is what the FY26 adopted budget was built on in March. This is what we were expecting to see for receive for revenue for the impacts fee. Then with the passage of the new Senate Bill 320, you can see where our fees start increasing. Specifically for FY26, you'll notice that we are expecting an increase of 14 million. This was the offset that Bethany was talking about. We'll talk about it a little bit more in the next slide. But overall, if you're looking at each of the fiscal years, so starting with FY26 going out through FY28, we are expecting a revenue increase of about 28.4 million in total. But like Jeff mentioned earlier, we're focusing specifically on FY26. So with this being considered inflexible revenue, that means it can't go to anything else in CDOT, it can't go to another program. We are administratively adding these funds to the FY26 budget for the out years. We will address that as we build those budgets at that point in time. Next slide. Okay, so here's item 2. So I won't go into a ton of detail. Bethany and Jeff really went into this one for us. This is just talking about the temporary suspension of the 15 million of the annual funds. As they mentioned, this is specifically for our debt service on our senior bonds. So CDOT and FHWA, they have an MOU agreement. You might be familiar with the Build America bonds or BABs. So that's what that is in relation to. So during the last budget setting process as part of the FY26 budget, the commission did approve a $15 million transfer. But as they explained, you guys are being asked to consider a temporary suspension of that for FY26. So essentially what that means on our end from the program, we are going to need to backfill that. So this request is asking, so this item 2 is asking to reallocate funds from our capital construction program to help offset that reduction. So next slide. Okay, so item number 3. So this one is in regards to The financing transactions that Patrick mentioned, they're also known as our infrastructure revenue bonds. So we've completed two. We've completed the 2024A, which is new money issuance, and also 2025A, which is our new money issuance that just closed in May of 2025. And so as part of the financing initiative and the management of these bonds, we have been able to basically receive some interest on our earnings. And so we are asking, or we are actually administratively adding the interest earned from these bonds. So the proceeds from each of these transactions have been invested in statutorily approved investments. We are working alongside our municipal advisors to manage these investments. So it's expected that the treasuries that have been purchased are expected to generate about 5.9 million in fiscal year 26. That's assuming that the investments are held to its maturity. We don't end up like reinvesting any of the proceeds or anything. So it's a pretty conservative like estimate. It's something that we're pretty confident in. We've worked hand in hand very closely with our municipal advisor. So we are asking that we want to administratively add this new revenue to the budget. And we are requesting that it goes to our capital construction program line. So it would specifically be for 10-year plan projects. Next slide. So item 4. So this one is in regards to the debt service commitments that we owe. So like I just mentioned, 2025A, which was the second transaction that we had of the IRB bonds, that occurred after the budget was set. So the budget was approved in March of 2025, but due to market conditions, we didn't actually close on the bonds until May of 2025. So right now what we need to do is we need to actually build in our debt service commitment into the budget to reflect that. So what we are requesting is that we need to transfer 11.6 million. So that will cover the debt service payment that we owe for this fiscal year, plus there's some accounting treatments that we need to do as well. And so we're requesting to move that from our capital construction program to our debt service line. And overall, that will, I think earlier Patrick showed in our meeting with the new commissioners, our debt service by fiscal year. That was showing you what it was before this is added. So you will see a little bump in that debt service amount for fiscal year 26. So overall, the total new debt service commitment for our program this year is 77.9 million. Next slide, please. So item 5, this is our final one. So what we were asking for is we were asking to reallocate the funding that we received as part of our interest earnings. What we want to do is those funds are being applied to our 10-year plan projects. And so what we're asking for is that now that creates unprogrammed funding. Our 10-year plan program is fully funded. So what we would like to do is actually move that funding to our safety critical and asset management program for projects on that side. Next slide. And so this slide here is just a summary. It's going to show you the net impact of all the increases and the reallocations that I just went through. This shows everything from the first amendment all the way through Amendment 5. You'll notice that the table there, you'll see the revenues that we are adding. So the impact from Senate Bill 320, the IRB interest revenues, and then also you'll see the $15 million suspension that's up for consideration as well. And so as a program overall, that will increase our revenue to the program by 4.9 million. That gives us a new annual budget for FY26 of 186.3 million. There's also those reallocations that we need to take into consideration as well. Even though we do have more revenue on the programmatic side, there was some adjustment specifically to our capital construction program. There was a net reduction of about 6.7 million to our capital construction program. A lot of that we discussed needed to be backfilled and for some other needs as well, like debt service and stuff like that. Even though it is a net even though it is a net reduction, we did want to point out that the recent bond transaction that we had in May of 2025 actually increased our capital construction program by 225 million. So that gave us quite a bit of funding for our projects as well. So I am going to hand it off to Patrick next. He's going to go through the supplement. So this is the other definition that Jeff gave us on more of the project side.
Thank you, Katie. Go ahead and advance to the next slide. So this month's Bridge and Tunnel Enterprise Budget Supplement includes one request from Region 3 for just over $5.1 million in faster bridge safety surcharge to replace the 285 over Conejos River overflow structure. This is being completed as part of a joint project that is also utilizing CDOT funds to complete a bridge preventative maintenance scope of work for an adjacent structure as well. So you can see from the statistics on the slide that this bridge is in the top tier of our bridge prioritization plan. The structure is reaching nearly 100 years of age. It's load restricted and reaching the end of its useful service life. Next slide. All right, so with your approval of the budget amendment, we will work on coordinating with the budget office to amend the fiscal year 2026 Bridge and Tunnel Enterprise and CDOT budgets to reallocate funds for the recent bond transactions, incorporate changes to our revenues that stemmed from the new legislation, and a few other programmatic adjustments. With your approval of the budget supplement, the US 285 or the Conejos River Overflow project will be able to move forward to construction. We'll also continue to bring you budget amendments and supplements throughout the year to allocate our remaining fiscal year 2026 funding. Next slide. With that, I will hand it back over to the chair, and we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, two pretty intensive budget related presentations, and we could take a quick break after this, but quickly, do you have any questions for Patrick or Katie? Nobody online? Yeah, so we've got a pretty long presentation coming up with DTR and such, and I'd like to take a quick 5-8 minute break before we get going. So like at 2:15, if we could get back here, that'd be wonderful. Catch up a little bit. Yeah, well, it looked like we had him, so. How are you? Oh. What we refer to as jumper cables. So in each marriage, you have two slide cables that have one here, and then this is a separate slide cable. Cushion
their breakdown of what DTR is comprised of on the next slide. So we break down generally into 3 different buckets. So passenger rail is probably our best known because we have the I would call them more front page projects, the Front Range Passenger Rail and Mountain Rail projects. And then we also have additional rail planning that is served by the passenger rail team. We also have our grant programs. These are probably the most important to your stakeholders and your constituents, because these are the agencies who are receiving funding, transit funding from the Division of Transit and Rail that is comprised of both state and federal funding. So our grant programs kind of breaks down into pre and post award. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. And then the third bucket is our transit planning and operations. Our Bustang group, which also gets a fair bit of notoriety, a well-loved transit system throughout the state, perhaps in your districts as well. And then our transit planning group that I'll talk about in more detail as we get into the transit connections study. And then transit project delivery. So in some of your districts, you may have mobility hubs. Those are projects that our transit project delivery team worked on in concert with the regions. So that's kind of DTR in a nutshell. If we go to the next slide. So passenger rail branch, kind of talked about this a little bit already, but this branch of DTR is led by Mo Sullivan. So Mo is really kind of leading the charge on Front Range and Mountain Rail. So these projects are kind of working on different timelines, but as I mentioned before, are really well supported, both within the department and then also just across the communities. We've received really just an outpouring of support from the communities on getting rail up and going. It's something that I think the state of Colorado has long been looking at, and we feel like we're getting pretty close to what I would consider not the finish line, but the start line for both of these projects. So that's super exciting. Go to the next slide. Our transit grant programs, kind of mentioned how that's bifurcated into pre and post award. If you think about this, pre-award is really about when a notice of funding availability, or NOFA, is issued to the point where a project is selected for funding. So that's kind of the pre-award side. And then on the post-award side, that's everything after the project is contracted and it's underway, just making sure that it's meeting state and federal conditions associated with those grants. I kind of talked about three buckets of Division of Transit and Rail. We kind of have a fourth bucket, if you will, and that's working with our regions. Within the regions, there are transit liaisons, 3 of which you see here. I think Region 1 is very close to having their transit liaison on board, and Region 4 is looking at that as well. But you can kind of see who those transit liaisons are. And really what these folks do is provide the regions a little closer proximity and a little bit better local touch, if you will, for what projects are meaningful in those regions. And so Scott, Angie, and Annie all do a great job in providing that local touch point for transit projects throughout the state. So planning and operations, this kind of, again, comprises the Bustang unit, CIP, as well as the planning unit. I think we can probably just head into the next slide, but I think the important part here to understand is that all 3 of these are working in concert. So of course, mobility hubs are being designed for operation with Bustang. So important that those groups are working together. And then the planning unit is really working to identify the needs for what goes into both mobility hubs and Bustang. So that's kind of why we have those grouped together. And then a little more on Bustang. So for those of you who have been around the state for a while, it was launched in 2015, pretty much as a modest service, operating only Monday through Friday. And really it was one trip weekday between Denver and the Mountain Corridor on I-70. So that's what we currently know as the West Line. And then that grew pretty substantially in 2022. where we received a 3-year pilot from the state legislature to expand busing significantly. So of course, this was right in the heart of the pandemic, where ridership had cratered pretty significantly, not only for busing, but also for agencies around the world. And so this funding was very integral to growing busing, specifically on what we consider the mainline corridor. So that's I-25 and I-70. However, that does not comprise the whole busing network. We also have our busing outrider network. And so if you think about what outrider is compared to mainline, those services are exclusively focused on getting folks in rural parts of the state to urban parts of the state. One portion of outrider funding is part of a federal funding pool called 5311F. And that again, the focus of that federal funding is for connecting rural citizens to urban areas where they can access services that they wouldn't otherwise have in rural parts of the state. So then we also have our seasonal services. Snow Staying is a very popular partnership that we have with the resorts. They in fact provide 60% of the funding for snow staying. So it's a great deal for the state. Those services are actually profitable with that cost share with the resorts, and it provides a direct opportunity for folks coming from the Denver Union Station, Fed Center area, and then directly to the resorts. So those services launched in 2019. We also have busing to Estes traveling up US 36, which is a fantastic opportunity to access Rocky Mountain National Park. And if you've ever tried to drive up there in the middle of the summer, say right now on a weekend, it's very hard to find parking. So, and so the bus service not only gets people to Estes Park, but right into Rocky Mountain where they don't have to deal with any of that. So, and then lastly, Pegasus that launched in 2022. And really the benefit with Pegasus, as you can kind of see in the lower right-hand corner here, is that it's a much smaller vehicle. It does not require a CDL to drive those. For a long time, we were having a very difficult time getting folks with CDLs into those positions. And so the Pegasus service really provided that opportunity to get folks driving those vehicles without that certification. And they're also able to use the peak period shoulder lanes on I-70, which multi-axle vehicles are not. And that includes our larger Westline vehicle. So that's busing. Here's our network, pretty comprehensive. You can kind of see the spine of I-25 between Fort Collins and Colorado Springs, and then on down to Trinidad. The West Line, as I mentioned, really started as a fairly modest service, ending in Glenwood Springs. That was recently extended, several trips going all the way out to Grand Junction. And then we also have some of our outrider services connecting down from Grand Junction to Durango and Bayfield, and then several kind of points from there. I'd say our two most successful outrider services are those that are connecting two resorts, so Crested Butte to Denver, and then also Steamboat and Craig to Denver kind of stand out. But then the interstate services, I-25 and I-70, also really highly utilized, perhaps function more like a commuter service where people are actually using them same day of trip. So they all have kind of different characteristics depending on who's using them. So CIP, the Capital Infrastructure Projects Unit, kind of talked about this group already. But again, I think outside of the mobility hubs that I think we have worked really well with the regions on getting up and running, particularly on the northern part of I-25 with Heather's group up there. We also are working on busing outrider stop improvements. So the outrider was kind of started on a shoestring, if I'm being honest about it. You know, we have a lot of stops that were kind of developed with handshake agreements with gas stations or other kind of local places where people might congregate in those communities. And what we've been doing is taking an inventory of all of those stops and really trying to formalize them, creating better access for persons with disability, and also connecting those to kind of the local transportation network. So that's been a comprehensive effort across the outrider network. We're also looking at establishing better maintenance facilities for busing. We currently contract all of this service And so having those maintenance facilities owned and operated by CDOT is potentially a long-term opportunity for the department to save money. And then lastly, we have our local agency project oversight, and that's just kind of working with agencies who receive grant funding from DTR to establish their own transit facilities. So talked about the planning unit, and really they'll get the spotlight here for the later part of the presentation. But these folks are really kind of our powerhouse for looking at, evaluating, and making recommendations for transit projects throughout the state. So they do take kind of a focus on busing, but they are not limited to that. They are also really fantastic with working with GIS and kind of developing some of the data, a lot of the data that you'll see as we go through the Transit Connections study here, and really kind of help to evaluate and provide a strong recommendation for how we are expanding our network. So this is the Transit Connection Study, and I kind of introduced myself already. I also want to introduce George Gromke. George is one of our planners on staff here, and really, if I'm giving him due credit, he was the project manager for this study. And so I get to talk to you about it today, but if you guys ask me any really hard questions, I might ask George to come to the table here. So thanks, George, for all your work on the Transit Connection Study. And also want to recognize John Mark Antonio, who works in our group, who also worked on the Transit Connection Study as well. So thanks to those two folks. And I guess with that, we can head into the next slide and kind of dive in. Does it make sense, Chair Cook, to pause for a moment just on the overall structure, or should we head into the project?
It looks like we have a question. Go ahead, Elise Jones.
Thank you. Thanks for that overview. Super helpful for me. Could you shed any light on why there's not transit liaisons for regions 1 and 4? Is there any reason behind that, or is it just something that hasn't happened for some reason?
Yeah, so I think the positions have historically been very difficult to fill. I know Region 1 is actually almost on the cusp of having somebody on staff. And then I think in Region 4, you all are kind of taking a closer look at the position and kind of evaluating how you want it to look. But
go ahead, Sally Chafee.
And I would just note that Region 1 has a BRT director that is focused on BRT throughout the city or regional area.
Good question. Looks like we can go ahead.
Okay. All right, so let's head to the next slide. So what is the Transit Connection Study? I think the best way to really understand TCS is it's an opportunity for us as a division to take a comprehensive look at how we're providing transit through the state. I think as we've expanded, as there's been a lot more focus and emphasis on expanding transit, we've done so in such a way that I think we've been able to leverage resources and implement those. And implement those resources as quickly as possible. So really TCS provided us an opportunity to take a step back, understand where gaps might be, and make recommendation on how those gaps might be filled. And so really, I think that's kind of a broader overview. What you see here are some of the key goals here. That we wanted to enhance accessibility. We wanted to create that connectivity to the transit network. And of course, be able to foster multimodal integration and promote sustainability. So the bottom part of the slide kind of gives an overview about how we framed the study. So fairly traditional look in terms of a planning study, current state of transit, what were the gaps, what are our recommendations, and then our final report. And we are very close to that last step. We can go to the next slide. So what is TCS and what is it not? I think, again, talking about TCS, it is a vision statement. It is an opportunity for us to really capitalize on the successes that Bustang has already established. It is not a specific project list. It is not, say, the 10-year plan that a lot of you all have kind of heard about from Darius and other folks. And so I think it's important to kind of understand that from the start. What we want to understand is where there are interconnectedness, where those gaps are, so that when opportunities arise, we have somewhat of a playbook to be able to select from that's based on kind of a logical set of facts, analysis that we've had the time and the opportunity to review, and then be able to pull from those project lists and then implement them into our 10-year plan or other strategic funding pools. And so some of the kind of criteria that I'll go through today really comes back to this. They may not be like specific projects per se, but really provide an opportunity for us to say, here's a gap, and how do we sort of address that gap? So that's kind of what it is and what it is not. And then as we look at kind of those existing conditions, I think what's great about the state of Colorado is that we have a lot of really active local partners, local communities who have either established their own RTAs or have been able to leverage local funding to implement transit here. And so what this map illustrates is how you would be able, what areas, counties specifically, that you'd be able to get to using a two-seat ride. So that's one transfer from one system to another. And so what you can see here is that it's actually fairly well covered, the state of Colorado. I think, we look at sort of some of the all-stars like RAFTA, the highest ridership amongst rural providers in the country. Of course, their Velasa RAFTA system is, known throughout the country. It's won multiple awards in terms of being a bus rapid transit system. And then RTD, of course, is really kind of the gorilla in the room, right? They're carrying 71% of all unlinked transit trips in the state. And that stands to reason. Transit tends to function a little bit more efficiently within urban areas where density exists. But I think what is also important to note is that, as I'm sure most folks have experienced, is even as you're going into rural areas and you're trying to, say, find parking in downtown Steamboat Springs or Vail, that's not always going to be the easiest opportunity. And so transit provides an opportunity to alleviate some of those concerns, even outside of rural areas. And as we look at how the state of Colorado is connected, you can see here again, Denver is in the lead, right? So it comprises a significant portion of our statewide population. It connects people to recreational, educational, and other sort of critical destinations. But I think what's important here to understand is that outside of Denver really is the larger portion of the state's population. And if you look at what those folks have access to, particularly by transit, it diminishes as you get outside of the state. And so I think the takeaway there for me is that, sure, transit has a great home in the city, but I think it also has an important home in the rural parts of the state too. And there's some data that we've uncovered here that I think substantiates that as we head into the next slide. Oh, yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah, how are you defining here transit access? Is it just like one ride per hour? Like, what's the frequency that you're looking at here?
It's really the ability to make the trip. So you're asking the question that we're going to get to here in a little bit, which is, you can make a trip on transit. Certainly, anybody could, but I think the question really that we're trying to answer here is how convenient is it? So that's those temporal gaps, kind of physical gaps between stops. So great question. Hope to answer that here as we move through.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so one important data set that we used was a locus model. And so this is location-based services, so essentially cell phone data, and it's tracking trips through the state. And so the background, sort of the denominator, if you will, here is all trips that are occurring through the state of Colorado as compared to the number of stops around the state of Colorado. So where you see the dotted areas, those are where folks are going to, but there is no transit access in those areas. And then, kind of in the darker areas, you see there are greater access to transit. And this kind of paints a little bit more of the picture, right? Like you can drive to a lot of parts of the state of Colorado, but you can't necessarily take transit there as easily. So that's kind of part of our background data. And then if we head into the next slide, I think this is one that really catches a lot of people's attention. For me, it was certainly an eye catcher as we started to uncover some of this data here. So zero car households, I think, is one indicator for transit usage, right? You don't have a car, you don't have an ability to use transit. And I think what most people kind of conceptualize when it comes to zero car households is that's kind of an urban issue. But I think what we've uncovered really here, if you look at Alamosa, and some other parts of the state, is this actually is almost as much of a rural issue as anything. And so, again, substantiates the need for and expanding transit options to other parts of the state. And really kind of leads to a question about equity that I think we really wanted to address with this study. So employment density, this is not surprising, I suppose. But I think what's important here, of course, we see a lot of the employment density within the cities. But I think what's important is who can access these jobs and how do they do that? So the Outrider Network, I talked about this kind of at the top of the presentation. It gets folks from rural areas to urban areas. So that's everywhere where you see some of the employment density. And so in terms of being responsive to that and providing our rural Coloradans with access to this job density, it's about being able to expand that rural network and get them to those jobs. And then senior population, again, I think this is one that folks are kind of well read in on. Our state, our country as a whole is getting older. And so this is how that looks in terms of the state of Colorado. It is pretty startling, I think, when you start to learn that the percent of population of seniors is actually greater outside of the city, outside of the Front Range. And so it is really, I think, another sort of rationale for expanding transit to be able to get to folks who may not have the ability to drive due to their age. And so this is another kind of background piece here. And so those are some of the inputs that we looked at kind of at the top of the study. I mentioned kind of what's the existing conditions, what are the existing model that we're looking at. So that flows into kind of our gaps analysis portion, where we looked at, okay, so here are those existing conditions and where is the travel demand? Where do folks in these areas want to go to? What is the accessibility within those communities to get to the locations they need to? And then how connected are they? And then lastly, who is this network serving? And how are they connected? That's really that equity piece. So here we are in terms of that gaps analysis. These are kind of the top 3 questions that we attempted to answer as we went into really understanding the problem, right? So where are people trying to go? What are the transit options available? And what services and amenities are people trying to access? The travel demand modeled trips of 20 miles or more. So I think that's important to understand because local trips we did not analyze. Again, being a statewide agency and statewide focus, we really wanted to focus on those longer trips. The community access, so understanding where folks could and could not get to on transit. And then also just where were those connections in terms of the connectivity, the transit network connectivity, and then talked about that equity piece. So head into the next slide. So just a few examples within kind of those 4 different buckets that I talked about. Transit access, I think, is something that is fairly straightforward. Can you or can you not access transit? This is something that I think is important for a few different reasons. I talked about Mountain Rail at the top of the presentation in terms of our passenger rail focus. So Granby is actually one of the stops that we would be serving there, but there is currently no way to get from Granby to Grand Lake or vice versa. So that's if you're a resident of Grand Lake and you're trying to access potential Mountain Rail service, you currently cannot do that on transit. I think the other thing is a little bit more of local knowledge, which is that the west entrance to Rocky Mountain National Park is the best entrance if you're trying to get in there. And so if we're wanting to kind of help folks access our national park resources, this might be the way to do it if you're thinking about establishing a transit connection there. And then on connectivity, this is kind of a somewhat more hyper-local look in Parachute, where this is our Bustang route that comes in and serves Parachute. However, their local network, which is fairly new, it's the Parachute Area Transit Service, and that does not actually connect to Bustang. So if you're a local resident, you're going to have to make up this distance between those two dots. And it's not significant, but I think, again, as we go through the analysis, we're trying to understand what are the convenience or the inconveniences, rather, that people experience, because these are the kinds of things that make people make decisions about, I'm going to use transit or I'm not going to use it. So that's kind of an example on the connectivity piece. And I am kind of just taking selections here. I'll say that as we wrap up the presentation here in a few minutes, we do have a draft report that we'll be providing an opportunity for the commissioners to take a look at. And if you want to get into deeper analysis, happy to answer questions or probably ask George to answer them and give you a greater look underneath of the hood. I think we can go to the next slide. So then we get into project types. So I think the next slide actually gives an overview about what the project types were. So again, coming out of that gaps analysis, understanding the issues, and then heading into what are the potential solutions on the next slide. And those look like different things like new or extended service. So if we're only getting to, say, Colorado Springs with the South Line Bustang, what is the opportunity to expand the market and the reach of that service if we were to get to Pueblo or Trinidad with that service? How does that change the accessibility if you're improving that extension and that supply of transit? And looking at regional fixed route as well as demand response within that kind of new or extended service. Service optimization, I think, kind of gets to your point, Commissioner, in terms of what is the frequency of that service? How are the transfers timed? Is your bus leaving right as you get there on your other bus and you say goodbye and then you never take transit again? And then, schedules, how are those lined up? Stops and stations are really looking at opportunities where we can add stops in order to make greater accessibility, and in some cases take away stops, because if a trip is taking a significantly long time, and particularly as compared to an auto trip, you might not do that again because it just takes too much time out of your day. And so looking at that as kind of a different project type. Head into the next slide. So I think one of the things that folks have asked a lot about in terms of how we got to a project type versus specific projects in this study, and I think really a lot of this comes down to implementation, as I think a lot of the commissioners who have been involved with our budget discussions now know that, like, our 10-year planning process, we're kind of in a challenging spot as an agency. And so I think what we didn't want to do is provide a menu of things that was specific to the state to implement. So if there was an intrepid regional agency or other agency that wanted to establish a partnership and implement these, we didn't want to limit that by saying these were CDOT only projects. So really, I think having a more agency neutral approach to the recommendations of the study was a signal to those agencies that they can take these recommendations and then implement them on their own. And so looking at project prioritization is really kind of that last component here. And we wanted these prioritizations to reflect those four main criteria for how we were evaluating. So was it connected? Was it providing greater accessibility? Is it improving equity? And is it financially sustainable? So I think, you know, within each of these, what we're really looking at is those geographical expansions. So being able to provide greater transit through the state. Does it improve the timed connections? You know, again, these are all kind of components of how well connected transit is. And then in terms of access, it's a similar kind of dichotomy where you're looking at geographical access where is a activity center, is it served or is it not served? You know, it's a fairly kind of simple approach to things. And then in terms of equity, I think we wanted to understand whether we were doing a good job in terms of providing access to disproportionately impacted communities. These are folks who tend to have a higher use and need for transit. And so we want to make sure that we're being responsive to those communities. And then lastly, really those making sure that we can pay for the service and would it be eligible for existing funding services. So in terms of the kind of project type maps, this is a pretty broad overview in terms of where they land throughout the state. So the dotted lines there are existing services, but they have changes to them. Red, regionally significant. Blue is interregionally significant, and the dots are maybe more about stations and kind of, you know, maybe more community-based improvements there. So that's the project types. And here are some of what those might look like. So Castle Rock really represents one of the largest travel demand areas in the state. And there is a significant need, as you can kind of see here with the trip overview, for a transit service that does not exist today. And so between Castle Rock and Denver, you see, you know, between 12 and 13,000 trips, whether it's on the weekday or weekend. And then between Castle Rock and Colorado Springs, lesser demand, but not insignificant nonetheless, between 5 and 6,500 trips through the week. And so this is something that we clearly identified as an area where people wanted to go, no transit access today. And then in terms of providing connectivity, also again, Canyon City is a growing kind of hub in southern Colorado. And currently we do have some you know, broader connection there, but there isn't any existing stop at Canyon City. And so part of what we used to have was a stop in Canyon City that does not exist anymore for Bustang. We're working on establishing that, but our study picked that up. And so I think that's something where if we can provide greater connections for Canyon City to Colorado Springs and vice versa, we can better connect rural parts of the state to urban ones. And then in terms of equity, I think what we understood in terms of this corridor here is that, you know, of course, Greeley and Weld County is one of the fastest growing parts of the state. And we see that connection in terms of between Denver and Greeley as being very significant. So almost as much as Castle Rock to Denver, but a significant corridor between Greeley and Denver. And so right now, we do have a current Outrider service, but that only operates at one round trip a day. And so we identified this as an opportunity to increase service and really help meet that demand. And then lastly, really expanding service. So between Montrose and Ouray, there is weekday service. There is no weekend service. And Ouray kind of being a significant part of the state where tourists are trying to access, the lack of weekend service does prevent folks from being able to access that. Not only that, it's really not about the tourists themselves, but also the employees that are serving this market. And so that's something that where, again, I think for a shorter connection like this, you might see Montrose or Ouray to potentially create a partnership to establish an improvement to the service there. And there are other opportunities through the Clean Transit Enterprise that folks may be aware of where they could potentially expand this. And so this provides, again, a playbook, an opportunity for them to pull from and expand that network. So that's TCS. It's a lot of data. And I will just say that from the start. And I think for folks who worked with data, you can look at it 100 different ways and come up with 100 different outcomes. I think for us, our approach to this, this study and using the data was really to uncover those gaps and to be able to provide anyone, not just the state, not excluding the state, but anyone an opportunity to be able to leverage both the analysis as well as the recommendations of project types to implement them and move them forward. And I think this goes all the way back to the top of the presentation, which is we established those wildly important goals to expand transit, and this really provides a methodological approach to pick projects that are going to help meet our statewide goals. And so that, I think, is what's the best takeaway for the TCS. I think the next slide is our next steps. Talks about what we are doing. Really, we're starting here at the commission to provide this information, kind of provide some insight in terms of what we covered through the report. We'll be going to stack and track the Transit Monthly, which is kind of it's a meeting with all of our transit agency partners throughout the state. And we do that on a monthly basis. CASTA conference is also an opportunity where we're going to be able to get feedback from transit agencies on how this matches up with their vision and their goals. And then also working with our region partners and giving them an opportunity to weigh in on the outcomes here. And then, of course, what all you will have to say today and afterwards as you have an opportunity to look through the study. So that is what I had for you today. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Ritter, and then Harris.
You don't mind sharing this? Thank you very much. Paul, thank you as usual. This is a wonderful presentation. As you know, I am particularly concerned with, access from Craig to Grand Junction, in part because of the medical facilities required for veterans in my neck of the woods, if you will, or there's not a lot of woods over that way, but at my neck of the sagebrush. But I think it drives a bigger issue, which is that as granular as that element can be of, busing from Grand Junction to Craig and back and forth, is that it does drive the question of a more global view, which is that as we see cuts in rural medical facilities that are about to come about, whether it be cuts in Medicaid, whether it be through other funding sources, shall we just say, the list of horrors that are coming upon rural healthcare providers is significant. And that only will create a greater demand for public transportation to our medical facilities in urban areas. And as we put together this plan, I think we do have to incorporate a sense of what's coming down the road. not just what the status is today, but have a little bit of vision about how the current administration in Washington is going to be impacting our delivery of services, whether they be medical or any other kind of human services out there. And I just hope as you guys are putting together this report, you integrate what we see going on a national level, and to some extent in terms of climate change and others, what's happening on a worldwide basis. Thank you.
Good point. Commissioner Gutierrez.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Commissioner Ritter. Paul, I appreciated the presentation. I just have a quick question. Maybe it's not so quick. How is this study being utilized with HB 24230, which is intended for CTE to help expand transit services? Is this being utilized in this manner or not?
That's a great question. I think we are going to make this study available, of course, to all transit agencies. I think it's really kind of a question of timing as the notice of funding availability for CTE funds comes out quite soon. This is a big reason why we want to finalize the TCS over the next few weeks, kind of integrating feedback from those groups. And so we will finalize the study. We will post the study on our website. We will make it known to transit agencies. And we think that it will align with the window as transit agencies are coming in, thinking about their own projects locally, but might, say benefit from looking at some of the recommendations out of the TCS. So even as CTE, the Notice of Funding Availability is being issued for 2025 now, TCS is a project that we intend to update fairly regularly. And so I think that in future funding cycles, there will be an opportunity for agencies to look at that, and potentially even opportunities where there could be state partnerships on what that could look like. And so I think we haven't necessarily got to the point of understanding what those partnerships and cost sharing might look like. But I could certainly see a case where that would be beneficial.
Go ahead.
And I guess the second part of that is as we are ramping up rail, does this study take a look at you were talking about partnering with stations and things like that for as we're expanding rail? Is that also included as part of this?
It is, yeah, it's assumed. Yep.
Other questions? So if I could just clarify, go ahead, Commissioner.
It was more of a comment that this is a really great study, and I look forward to digging into the details, but I can see how it will be really, really helpful for a lot of different reasons as we figure, go forward in planning and figuring out funding priorities and that kind of thing. So thanks.
And then just to clarify, this isn't necessarily a set of priorities for Bustang service necessarily. This is creating some, doing the lifting of identifying opportunities. And then will you, to the extent you see an opportunity, say with, an entity, will you reach out to them and help to facilitate a discussion, or do you just distribute the report, or what's your plan for that piece?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Chair. And I think really is the next part of where we're at with TCS is we want to finalize the study. We want to get feedback. I do think that as we're going through and kind of engaging transit agencies directly on what the project types are, that will naturally kind of flow into a dialogue around how those projects can be implemented. But I think you're raising an important point that we probably need to take a harder look at in terms of how we continue to engage and, move these projects forward, whether it's through, a state project list or through a local project list. It's a great point.
And then how do you want people to get feedback to you once they've gone through the report? Do you have just
Yep.
directly to you, email to you?
Yeah, so we plan to send up a follow-up email for the end of the week, and we'll be providing kind of obviously the draft report itself, and then a template for where comments can be integrated into that, into the report, so.
Okay, great. All right, we're a little bit behind, but thank you very much for a good presentation in your report. So next up is the winter maintenance and safety update. We've got a combined presentation here with Sean Smith and Daryl Link. Am I saying the name correctly? Link? Okay, yeah. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair Cook. As mentioned, my name is Sean Smith. I am the Director of Maintenance and Operations, and what we wanted to do today is provide a winter report out for fiscal year 25. And then subsequently, when we get into October, we're going to do a winter report stand-up for FY 26. I just want, before we start rolling in the slide deck, want to make a comment there. The next couple slides have been updated from what's online. So there's just a couple additions in here. Next slide, please. So the agenda is just a brief overview of Division of Maintenance and Operations. And then we'll go into the winter report out. That being said, I do have time with the newly appointed commissioners tomorrow afternoon to take a deeper dive into basically the DM&O work unit itself. And congratulations to the newly appointed commissioners as well. Next slide. So this is the organizational chart for the Division of Maintenance and Operations. I report to Executive Director Lou, and I work through and with Sally and Herman on numerous opportunities that we have within DM&O. Additionally, I work kind of dot line with the RTDs. And I say that because, DM&O's budget is $500 million, but I share $312 million with the RTDs. So we kind of dot line there. Helping me out and assisting me is I have two deputy directors of a deputy director of maintenance and a deputy director of operations. And really, if you think of maintenance, once the project is designed, once it's built, we're there to support as the maintainer. Our job is to preserve and maintain that asset to its standard as close as possible. That could be guardrail. This includes winter operations, which we're going to take a deep dig into here. But, the roads are built, they're paved, they're fresh. We throw snow on there, we got to get it off, right? For the safety of the traveling public. Then you go into the Deputy Director of Operations. He dot lines pretty much to the traffic engineers. And once again, we're out there to support those work units. So we have 9 maintenance sections, highway maintenance sections out there, and we have 5 traffic maintenance sections that we dot line to from that office. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand this off to Mike Chapman, who is our Winter Operations Program Manager.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Chair Cook. Mike Chapman, I'm a meteorologist. I've been with CDOT for a few years here. Run winter operations, which is basically weather operations and avalanche operations. So what I'm going to talk about today is just kind of the year in review of this past winter. Kind of put it into perspective versus past winters before this one. And then I'll talk about avalanche as well. This first slide is, it talks about storm events. My team looks at the weather and decides, okay, this is going to impact, especially if it impacts urban areas, I-70, interstates. We go ahead and number the storm. We want to hold on to it historically, learn from it. We also want people's antennas up when we number a storm that it's going to be impactful somewhere, mainly interstates and Front Range. Last year we had 28 numbered storms. That's close to average. Average is somewhere around 29 or 30. storm event days. So those 28 days, we had 73 actual storm days. What's really interesting though that stands out here is we had 10 back-to-back storm cycles. So out of those 28 numbered storms, 21 were connected to another storm. That means we had multiple storms that had less than 24 hours to recover in between. The reason I point it out is not only from a maintenance perspective, but from my guy's perspective too. Consecutive storm days means consecutive days in the field. It's difficult. A highlight here, November 5th through 9th, that was a major front range storm, mainly I-70 southward. In fact, Region 2 got almost all of their lower elevation snow in that 3 or 4 days. Very, very substantial. Closed down I-70, I-25 was very significant to the start of the season. And then other than Thanksgiving, it kind of backed off until after Christmas. From Christmas through President's Day, which is 50 something days, we had 13 numbered storms, almost half of them. So it was a very significant, shorter time frame, very impactful part of winter for us. President's Day was very long, very unique, very long for my team, but Sean told me Section 9, probably Section 6 and 2 also, the 28 straight snow shift days. So pretty amazing. When you look at the high level numbers, it's about average, except for down south in Julie's region. It was significantly low for places like Wolf Creek. Summit County actually kind of stood out for having an above average year. So I-70 took its lumps, that's for sure, especially during that New Year's to President's Day time period. Next slide, please. We'd look at this, kind of put it into perspective nationally. These are cities over 100,000. We have 4 of the top 11, including Boulder. Boulder was actually a little bit below average, but still made the top 5. So I guess the moral of the story is our urban areas get a significant amount of snow compared to a lot of other places. And this winter wasn't that different. Next, please. This is just a time series of all of the numbered storms. And you can see right there in the middle, January through February. Like I said, it illustrates it again that it was a very impacted 50 to 60 days right there. Next slide. Here's another time series. This is looking back in time. The red line is average. This is the station average snowfall days versus the 50-year average. So that kind of puts it into perspective too, that while we didn't have above average as far as storm numbers go, the length of those storms actually was significantly longer than it normally is. So longer shifts for the maintainers. My guys, for example, during President, and I was out there too for most of it, was Valentine's through President's Day, we went 8 straight days of mitigation. So that's just doing a couple days is pretty taxing. Next slide, please. This is looking at weather service warnings. So winter storm warnings out of the weather service actually was below average. Likely also because the storms themselves were longer. So it didn't necessarily require extra warnings, but the warnings lasted longer. Next slide. Winter weather advisory is pretty close to average as well. Probably the same, just a little bit below, probably for the same reason. Next slide. It wasn't too off the charts windy either. So high wind warnings were somewhere around average as well. Next slide. Okay, so you can see we like graphics here. We're weather people. My guys are really good at it too. I'm not taking credit for any of it. I'm just reporting it. The image on the left is average temperature departure from normal. We're looking at normal as being an average 1991 to 2020. So you can see here, we are actually above average on the Front Range, pretty much across the board. Mountains, kind of a mixed bag. Certain pockets were actually below average for temperature during the winter. And then on the right side, it's departure from normal for precipitation for the winter months. So precipitation on the eastern Colorado may end up being a little bit of rain getting in there, but you can see that big target bullseye on the bottom in region 2. That basically is that November storm. Pretty crazy stuff. And then you can see the western slope and southern mountains well below average as far as precipitation goes. And we're starting to kind of see the price we're paying for that with some of the fires. Next slide. Snowfall percent of average here. So the warm colors are above average. So region 2, well above average, but over a few days in November, basically. And then the Four Corners, western slope, significantly low. You can kind of zero in on I-70 here, Vail Pass and Summit County, a little bit above average, and we kind of felt that, especially over that January, February time period. And then the accumulated snowfall, fairly typical for our mountains to get, in the 2s and 300s. What's not typical is for Wolf Creek Pass and some of those places to be so far below average. Wolf Creek's generally the highest accumulating snow at about 400 inches, and they were in the 200 and something inches. So significant. Next slide. This is kind of hard to see, but we sum it up on the right-hand side. Like I said, it's a mixed bag. The northern mountains, Jones Pass off of US 40. Actually, it's 12th snowiest. Echo Lake, which is just south of Idaho Springs, close to Mount Blue Sky. Also, it's about the 14th snowiest. And then you have Bear River, that's up off of 131, I think, out of Steamboat. Was significant, like their 3rd driest. So not a lot of fluctuation, I guess. And we see that in the mountains a lot with our climate. Central Mountains, Porphyry Creek, which is off of 50, near Monarch, 8th. And then Overland and McClure, which are more on closer to the Grand Mesa areas, very dry. And then all the southern mountain ones that we're highlighting here, Shark's Tooth, Wolf Creek, Summit, and Middle Creek, all very, very dry. Next slide. This is another way of looking at it too. This tracks our snowpack throughout the winter. You can see different highlights. The early November storm, we got a little bump. Thanksgiving was pretty significant. There were a couple of numbered storms around then. President's Day is tattooed on my brain, basically. It was tough. After that, though, it kind of tailed off. March wasn't too awfully bad. The results as far as snow goes over interstates on the Front Range were average, but came in spurts, I guess. So we felt that. Next slide. We do storm readiness calls when we get a numbered storm and we're like, ooh, we better really talk about this and just get our ducks in a row. We do it statewide. Sometimes we'll do regional ones, but we didn't do any regional ones this year. If it's just going to hit the mountains or something, maybe we'll just bring in Region 5 and Region 3. We had 9, which is above average. And it seemed like every one of them, we had to do 3 or 4 days of follow-ups. Just because the storms just hung on. So we had calls for early November, Thanksgiving, President's Day. I think they're really valuable. I think we've kind of tightened them up. There are calls that anybody that's in this room, if you want to be on that list, just let me know. If you want to be on any of the weather forecast lists, let me know too, and I'll send them to you. Or I'll just put you on the Google group. As far as these calls, I changed it up last year. We have something called Pathfinder where we work with National Weather Service. So they're on the calls and they give like an overview of the weather. And then my guys are weather as it relates to the pavement. So start to kind of connect the dots with actual physical things that we have to do to the pavement. It's really critical to understand that, especially in like the shoulder seasons, like the fall and the spring, where you can get 5 or 6 inches of snow, but you might not even need to plow it. It might melt, or you might not need to put any chemicals down. We also added weather to a look ahead, I-70 look ahead that the Traffic Operations Center puts together on Fridays. We really only get involved if we think I-70 is going to get hit, which seems like it's about 90% of the time during the winter. So next slide. As far as the summer weather, this is kind of, I mean, we're kind of in the middle of it at this point. These were built in May. We typically do this after action multiple times to different groups. So we build it in May after the season's over. So it did a pretty good job here of kind of figuring out, yes, the western slope's going to still stay in drought mode, but almost all of the areas west of the divide have some kind of drought type of designation going right now. So you can see kind of nationally, that's the southwestern part of the United States is pretty dry. So bring on the monsoon, please. Next slide. Seasonal temperature outlook, above average temperatures. I think we've seen that. Today's been kind of a nice reprieve. But we've had a decent number of 90-degree days, at least on the Front Range. Precipitation outlook, basically, these look at teleconnections like El Nino and things like that, different ocean oscillations and stuff, and then it makes a seasonal prediction. I'm not a climate scientist, I'm a meteorologist, so I get some skepticism on how accurate we can be with some of those. But I'm being convinced that we're getting more accurate. So anyway, this is just showing seasonal precipitation outlook as being dry, but not significantly dry. Next slide. This is looking at fire potential. So this was also generated in May. So if we're looking at July, it looks like they missed Colorado. So that needs to be updated. And I'm guessing it is updated. But for right now, that's, I guess it kind of makes my point that, you know, when we're doing forecasts that are a month or two out for things, the skill dives off pretty quickly. But that's just the pessimistic scientist in me. Next slide. Winter outlook. So this is doing the same thing. It's looking at teleconnections. It's looking at El Nino, La Nina. The Pacific Decadal Oscillation PDO is also one that affects us, among others. So put all that together and what do you get? Exactly why people don't like weather people is we're just flipping the coin and going, I think it's going to be equal chances. Because I think I'm going to probably get that right. I like to think that my group is really good at zeroing in on tactical weather. Like we're the best. I'm saying my guys are the best. But you know, long-term stuff, like I said, it's a mixed bag. Next, please. One thing we added to something that we put out every 3 days, it's our convective fire weather outlook. We were asked by one of the safety folks to add heat, so we added it this year. If you want to be on the list to get this non-winter type of forecast, we're generating these 3 days a week, including today. Next. Last part about the weather, other things that we provide. outside of winter, we do fire and wind warnings. We're trying to figure out, we're going to probably tweak some of the PDs around those, tighten them up a little bit. We do really specific project or incident or emergency management types of forecasts. So think Blue Mesa Reservoir. I think we did probably about 4 months straight of daily forecasts for it. Or if we get, a pothole on an overpass or something like that on I-70, and it's mission critical to understand whether or not it's going to be wet or it's going to be snowing while they're trying to do operations. We do a lot of training. We do some flood forecasting, runoff forecasting. We didn't really have to deal with that a whole lot this year because it was a long runoff. Past weather requests for FOIA requests or other type of forensic things. Any new RWIS or the weather stations that go out come across my desk and I thumbs up it or thumbs down it. And then that's my team. Next slide, please. Okay, very quickly, avalanche, I'll just take a minute or two here. We train the trainer. So we train the people that train the regions, especially down in Region 5. We hold classes. We do one in Grand Junction, General Explosives, artillery school or gun school, I call it, is the end of September every year. We usually get 40 or 50 guys out there. We take 3 guns, and we fire about 100 rounds. If you want to come out and see it, it's pretty cool. It gets hot, but it's pretty cool. And we'll give you some lunch. And then we already did the trainer on the howitzer. For this year, there's the dates, same type of cadence on training. We have a close relationship with the regions and the guys that go out and mitigate. My team does mitigation on Section 9 with help from Section 9 maintainers that are certified. It's a very good, close relationship, really good guys. Next slide. This is the season for missions, total number of missions over 100. Natural avalanches that hit highway paths that we are in charge of is 211. Total triggered avalanches on highway paths is over 300. And you can see the efforts of when we actually decide to shoot something. The center line covered by our triggered avalanches dwarfs the natural avalanches. It's 10 times. So it's an order of magnitude. Total detonations 474. Avalanche closure time is 78.6, but I can assure you only a couple of those were I-70. We had to close for a howitzer mission. We had to close for a mission on Loveland Pass, an explosives mission there, and we had to close on the west side for a couple of missions, but those were very short. The other thing that stands out here is the amount of artillery that was used. Wolf Creek usually by far dwarfs what we have to do on I-70. They did not shoot 1 round. So pretty interesting. We'll see what happens this next season though. The rest of these talk about the different rack systems that we've invested in. A lot of gas exploders because those were the initial technology that came out. But we are moving towards explosives, especially on a path on I-70 where we're using a howitzer. 2 more slides. Next one. This just talks about state avalanche costs. It says on the bottom right, over the past 5 years, the cost of avalanche maintenance, it should say the average yearly there at $790,000. 2023 was major down south. 2025, not as much, and it's because we didn't have to do as much activity down south. Next slide. And then this just kind of zeroes in on the different areas. Durango still deals with Red Mountain Pass and Coal Bank Mullis, those areas. They just get it every year. A lot of helicopter operations down there too this year. As far as I-70 is concerned, Loveland Pass, my team teams up with Section 9 and Section 6. So Section 9 on I-70 and Loveland Pass, and Jason's guys on Bertha Pass on the west side. I just want to give them props because the closure time from last year to this year was, I think last year was in the 180 hours, and it was because of the MLK event a couple years ago. This year it was 13.5. And it's because they figured out how to fight it better and did an amazing job. Loveland Pass, on the other hand, was kind of a pain. So just a lot of activity, a lot of missions, a lot of avalanches, and a lot of the closure time was Loveland. I think that's it for my slides.
Yeah, that's all we have. So happy to entertain any questions or comments, if any.
Go ahead, Commissioner Marcano, and then Commissioner Masters.
All right. Thank you. So kind of with some of what we're seeing at the federal level, with cuts to things like the National Weather Service, I'm just curious, do we have a contingency for how to continue to get good information so that we can, continue to predict and prepare for major weather events?
Yeah, so we partner up with the Weather Service, trading information and that kind of stuff. NOAA does run the national and global scale weather models that we use, but we're not just using American models. We use a European model, we use a Canadian model. We kind of put it all together and figure out which one we trust. I worry a little bit about degradation of the model if we're not going to launch balloons as often as we should. I am looking into partnering up with CSU to put our own balloons up tactically, that I will share that information to Weather Service with. I do know from talking to them that the initial cuts were very scary, but they brought up back a significant number of those cuts came back. But I do know from my relationship with them that before the cuts were even made, they were down people. Radars still seem to be stable. That's something we use tactically. The balloons are a problem. I'm looking into kind of solving it ourselves. And then I think the modeling piece of it, I'm not too worried about it because the way that we access the models is actually a paid subscription from a private company accessing NOAA models. I lean on the European model a lot too, so it's not worrying me as much. Thank you.
Commissioner Masters?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you very much. It was a lot of snow this year due to poor planning and impatience. I got caught in 4 or 5 of them, just trying to get back home. And the safety that you guys are implementing and the training, these guys are plowing snow better today than they have, and I've been driving it for 40 years. So my hat's off to you guys for what you do. I will say that I was in a meeting the other day, and just so that everybody knows, you guys they're the model. I mean, our neighboring states look to you guys for some of the safety that you've implemented, and the housing issue that you brought up, and I was kind of on the back end of that, but caught a little bit of it. Providing housing and trying to get these guys to be more readily available. Utah's looking at it, YDOT's looking at it. There's some guys that are using that, and so I applaud you for that too. That you're a leader in that area of it. And then the lighting, you guys are surpass everybody around. It's not going regionally, it's gone nationally, where there's guys in MoDOT, there's DOTs all over the United States in snow country that look to you guys at what you've done and what you've accomplished. So my hat's off to all of you. Thank you.
No, thank you, Commissioner.
Others? Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Ritter.
Just a quick question, because it does impact particularly the transportation over the next month of various forms. What do you see in terms of the monsoon season from your data coming into Colorado? Will it come only in the southwest, or will it drift up? Or do you expect it at all to be significant this year?
I mean, the last couple of years hasn't been too significant, at least from on the front range. We didn't get a whole lot of this last monsoon action because just the atmospheric circulation kept everything into New Mexico and Texas. I'll be shocked if we don't get some kind of cycle of monsoon. I always tell people, I grew up in Texas. I say, yeah, we have summer for like 2 weeks and then it decides not to be summer anymore. It's monsoon. Hopefully it doesn't bring floods, and burn scars and stuff like that. Being able to give you a solid prediction of it's going to happen in the next week or two. I mean, we can look outside right now and I would classify that as monsoon. That's going to hang on for a few days. I wouldn't be surprised to see multiple cycles like this over the next month and a half.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just say I really appreciate Todd Masters' observations and appreciation for what you're doing. It's such a heavy lift, and it sounds like some years much more than others. So may you have no back-to-back storms this year and keep away from the holidays and all that sort of thing. But thank you. Thanks very much.
No, thank you, Chair.
Oh, we have another question. Go ahead, please, Commissioner Holguin.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge all the work that the team does, and to think about this weather this last year with the vacancy rates that were when I started as a commissioner is really scary. And so I want to uplift the long-term investments that have happened, because what we see here, I can't imagine what would have been like with the vacancy rates and what that would have done to the rest of the team. And so, and for the rest of the commission, I just want to remind everyone that this is not by accident. These were intentional steps that with John, who's no longer here, but doing amazing work elsewhere, and the rest of the team that CDOT has been able to lead the work. It's been the increase in pay for workers. It's been the housing innovation to figure out how we leverage the resources that we have to ensure that our people can continue to be taken care of while our residents continue to be taken care of. And so great job to the rest of the team. And hopefully we don't have back-to-back storms, but we continue to rely on all that we have. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Just to add is, I said it in a TC meeting before that, we were recognizing an employee, and everything that Commissioner Holguin has just brought up, it generates, but it's a team effort from TC all the way down. So I appreciate the support.
Yeah. Thank you. Well put. Okay. With that, we'll move on to the second portion, which is the Office of Transportation Safety, overview of winter operations, historical loss history, and safety trends. Welcome.
Chair, Commissioners, my name is Darrell Link. I'm the Director of the Office of Transportation Safety and Risk Management. So before I get into the second half of the Winter Ops presentation, I'd just like to take 2 minutes to talk a little bit about my team and what we provide to CDOT. Next slide, please. So within my office, we have 3 functional areas. I have risk management, which administers all of the claims that are processed through our organization. Those include property damage claims, work comp claims, and also our insurance program. I think you met Jofi Porter earlier in the earlier presentation. I also have what's called the Highway Safety Office, and that is the pass-through organization at the state level for federal funds from NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. We pass through about $13 million worth of federal funds each year to our grantees who focus on traffic education and law enforcement, including high visibility enforcement. We have about 85 law enforcement agencies that receive funds from us with a focus on removing impaired drivers from the roadway. The third area that my team covers is employee safety. So all the programs, policies, and safety-related equipment that we use, that comes through my organization. So the next slide just shows a representation of my organizational chart. I have about 18 people. The safety team is on the right side. There's only about 3 team members. On the left is my risk management group, and on the bottom is the highway safety office. So with that, I will go ahead and jump in to discussing our loss history and our safety trends over the last 10 years when it comes to winter operations. So this particular bar graph, there's a lot of information on it, and I won't touch on everything, but each of these bars represent the total number of incidents involving snowplows. The orange bar is the number of incidents, and the blue bar is the number of miles driven each winter season. As you can see, 2014 and 2015, we had pretty significantly high numbers of snowplow incidents with our operators. Each of the green boxes on top of the bar charts are actually safety initiatives that we implemented over the course of that 10-year period to try to drive down the number of incidents that we were having. Of particular note, in 2015, we saw a significant reduction in the total number of snowplow incidents. We implemented a program where our snowplow operators actually pre-winter season jump in their truck and do a pre-winter exercise on the road. So they're identifying hazards on their routes, and they're looking for opportunities where they can have safer turnarounds when they get to the end of their route. Also, we implemented some apparel that slips on over your feet. We call them winter treadwear. Those provide extra traction for our employees when they're walking on snow and ice, and it also helps them when they're getting in and out of their vehicle. These winter treadwear personal protective equipment, it can be worn inside the vehicle and outside the vehicle. So prior to 2015, we provided our employees some protection with some footwear, but they had to remove them when they got into the truck and put them back on. And obviously the employees didn't comply that well with having to put them on and off all the time. So next slide. But if I could go back to the previous slide just a second, I forgot. Really the key takeaway of this entire slide is that orange trend line. So over the course of the last 10 years, on balance, we have seen a reduction in our total number of incidents each year. We go up and down a little bit because of the number of miles that are driven and the exposure hours that our employees have. But if we kind of do an analysis and a trend calculation, we see that the trend is downward, which is what we want. Next slide. This slide just breaks out the top 3 causes of what we call employee-caused incidents. This is where one of our employees will hit a fixed object or will hit another vehicle versus civilian causes where some other drivers are running into us or damaging our property. The top 3 causes for employee incidents are striking fixed objects. Examples would include bridge joints, clipping the garage door when entering one of our patrol bays. That is the number one type of incident that we typically have, and it's been true over the last several years. Striking other vehicles, we do have a percentage of incidents where our vehicles do collide with other drivers. And also backing related incidents are third in terms of the top 3. Top 3 for civilian causes is improper passing. So civilians try to pass our plows both on the left and the right, and that's usually not a good choice if they lose control and they do slide into us. Secondly is following too closely. Our snowplow operators sometimes have to brake sharply, and if somebody's following too close, obviously they're going to run straight into the back. Third is driving too fast for conditions. This one includes crossing the center line if they start to fishtail and they either crash into the side of our front blade on the plow or head on. And unfortunately, we have had a few of those over the course of the years. Next slide, please.
And just a quick
Question.
question. What is a backing incident? Is that like?
That is an incident where the damage that occurs to the plow results from backing up.
Okay.
Okay, this next slide just breaks down some of the injury categories. Sprains and strains by far are the number one type of injury that our employees have. Struck by injuries, that would include if they're working on changing blades on the plow, they get struck by the blade and they injure themselves. Slip and trip falls is the third category. The graph that you see shows, and this refers back to those winter treads that I mentioned. I thought it was noteworthy to point out how effective those have been in helping us reduce slipping and falling on ice. Back in 14 and 15, we had an average of about 20 injuries involving slips and falls on ice. Slips and falls on ice can be very serious in nature. We've had a supervisor who was injured, who was out for 4 months with a concussion as a result of slipping and falling on ice. As you can see, for the remainder of the years, 2016 through last year, 2024, those numbers have remained low. The ones that you do see in 17, 18, 19, and so forth, those are incidents that occurred where the employees were not wearing their treadwear. Next slide, please. So the next two slides just kind of summarize some of the trends we're seeing over the last 10 years. First, and I mentioned this previously, overall incidents continue to trend downward, which is what we want to see. CDOT incidents to mile ratio continues to trend upward. And what I mean by that, if we look back in 2014, we were averaging about 1 incident for every 25,000 miles driven as a collective for our entire fleet. And now we're averaging about 1 incident for every 30,000 miles driven. So that's the upward trend, and we would like to see that continue. Could you go back to the positive trend slide, please? Employee-caused incidents make up a smaller percentage of the total incidents that I showed you with the slide regarding the reduction in overall employee injuries year over year. Well, I talked about slips and trips already. Safety training. We have implemented a variety of different safety training over that 10-year period, and it has proven to be very effective. When we started introducing training, we had a completion rate of about 67% going back to about 2014. And just this last year, we had a training completion percentage of about 90%. So we're getting a lot more traction with getting our employees trained. Next slide. This last slide is just a summary of some of the areas where we can still improve. Civilian-caused incidents are increasing. We are working with our PR department to have a campaign, radio spots, and other forms of media to try to get the message out to drivers for this upcoming winter season to basically to stay back and stay away from our plows. Some injury categories are trending upward relative to the total number, specifically the struck by types of injuries, and it's normally when our employees are switching out plow blades. So we have a training program that we're currently working on that we're going to be rolling out for that issue at the beginning of winter ops this coming season. One other interesting statistic is when we look at our snowplow incidents over the entire year, when we have our very first major snow event, our incidents spike. That accounts for the greatest number of incidents. When we have major snow events later in the year, typically that number comes way down. So we are also focusing on early pre-winter training and exercises behind the wheel to make sure our employees are prepared to get out there on that first major snowstorm. Lastly, operator fatigue is also something that we're watching closely. Last year, we had 3 incidents where employees were getting drowsy behind the wheel, and we actually had a couple that actually overturned their vehicle. So this is something we're also focusing on. And that is pretty much all I had for this quick summary, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Anybody online? I haven't been good about checking with you all. Yeah, it does sound good. Well, thanks again for what you do and really impressive results. You know, I'm quite impressed.
Thank you. If I could make one point, the results we're getting are really a result of a team effort. We have regional safety officers out in our region who are out there on a daily basis helping our employees with working safely. So I wanted to definitely acknowledge them as well.
Thank you, and thank them for us as
I
well,
will.
please.
Thank you.
Okay, on to our last item, just power through. So I'll turn it over to Darius Pakbas and Libba Rollins here, and anxious to hear the GHG planning standard overview. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to give the overview of this planning standard. We don't have an overview of the division today, but I'll be happy to do that next time. So my apologies on that. And for those of you attending the orientation tomorrow, we'll see the division overview on that. We believe it's probably a good time to do an overview of the GHG planning standard rule, which was adopted in 2022, knowing that that may be a topic of conversation that will come up in the coming months as we talk about the adoption of the statewide transportation plan, the department's 10-year plan, and I believe there's Pueblo's regional transportation plan is going to be coming up for adoption, and I believe there might be some amendments to regional transportation plans coming up. So since we do have new commissioners here, we wanted to go over that planning standard and see if there was any questions on that. So I'm going to turn it over to Libba Rawlings, who's going to give the majority of the presentation. She's one of our greenhouse gas specialists within my division. So Libba, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me today. Next slide, please. So Colorado has made an abundance of commitments to help address the state's role in contributing to climate change, and it's ultimately these commitments that are responsible for the creation of the greenhouse gas planning standard. So back in 2019, the legislature passed House Bill 1261, which set legally binding greenhouse gas emission reduction targets for the state, 25% reduction by 2025, 50% by 2030, and 90% by 2050. These reduction targets were then updated in 2023 with House Bill 16, adding additional interim targets and then changing the 2050 target to net zero. And to help determine a pathway to meet these binding emission reduction targets, the state gathered all the agencies and experts to develop the Colorado Greenhouse Gas Roadmaps, which are documents that outline a specific set of near-term actions the state needs to take in order to meet these reduction targets. Two versions of the roadmap have been released. The first one was in 2021, and then another one in 2023, or 2024, excuse me. But it was this first roadmap that identified transportation as the largest source of emissions in the state, and also identified that a planning standard would be a very beneficial pathway for reducing emissions from transportation. So Senate Bill 21260 made this recommendation in the roadmap a requirement to develop the rule. Next slide, please. So the transportation planning standard is just one of many policies that were identified in those roadmaps in order to reduce emissions. Notably, the very first roadmap set a goal of reducing 12.7 million metric tons by 2030 from the transportation sector. And of that 12.7 million metric tons, about 8 million metric tons is attributed to occur from low and zero emission vehicle rules. So things like the advanced clean trucks, low NOx, the clean car standard, as well as electrification investments in public infrastructure, utilities, and fleet turnover. But the remaining 4.7 million metric tons, one of which is the planning standard, proposes a 1.5 million metric ton reduction by 2030. Which is equivalent to about taking 300,000 cars off the road for a year. So there are a multitude of efforts right now ongoing headed by a variety of agencies to reduce emissions from the transportation sector, and the Transportation Planning Standard is one of these efforts. Next slide, please. So in order to reduce emissions from the transportation sector, it's important to understand what the largest sources of those emissions are. As this graph shows, light-duty vehicles, so those are passenger vehicles, trucks, vans, are the largest source of emissions in Colorado. And so there are three main ways that we can reduce emissions from light-duty vehicles. One, we can increase the efficiency of those vehicles through engine improvements, tire tread, operational improvements. Two, we can use lower carbon dioxide intensive fuels. There are many on the market today I'm sure you're familiar with: electric vehicles, hydrogen, hybrid, even renewable natural gas. And then the third way, lastly, is we can change how we travel and how we transport goods. And it's really this way that the Greenhouse Gas Transportation Planning Standard attempts to reduce emissions. These are things like investing in public transit, telecommuting, changes in land use patterns that all change how we travel and transport goods. Next slide, please. So following the passage of SB 260, which made that roadmap recommendation a requirement, the Commission initiated a formal rulemaking process starting in July of 2021, and then amended the state's planning rules finally in December of 2021. There's extensive outreach, lots of stakeholder engagement to get to that stage. And in the big picture, the rule requires CDOT and the state's 5 MPOs to create transportation plans that provide more travel choices, resulting in reduced greenhouse gas emissions over time. And the mechanics of the rule require agencies to calculate the total greenhouse gas emissions expected from the existing transportation network within their boundaries, as well as any planned future capacity projects within their boundaries and show reductions over time. This standard recognizes that the projects we build have an impact on how people travel, and also acknowledges that making systems level planning decisions has the greatest opportunity for reducing greenhouse gas emissions rather than individual projects. So overall, the planning standards goal is to reduce emissions from the transportation sector through how we develop our long-range transportation plans. Next slide, please. So each MPO is subject to the rule as well as CDOT, and each MPO is responsible for determining the emissions from the transportation network within their boundary, as well as any future planned capacity projects within their boundaries. The same is said for CDOT. We are responsible for the emissions resulting from the transportation network outside the MPO boundaries, as well as any future capacity projects outside the MPO boundaries. That does not limit an agency from modeling or looking at the impacts of projects beyond capacity projects. You can look at everything and count it towards your reductions. Next slide, please. So when analyzing the transportation infrastructure and the boundaries of the MPOs and then within the non-MPO areas, CDOT and the 5 MPOs are required to achieve individually set greenhouse gas reduction levels at 4 different time periods: 2025, 2030, 2040, and 2050. And these reduction levels are shown in the table here. And to determine compliance with these reduction levels, agencies must compare their baseline long-range transportation plan to any future adopted long-range transportation plan. And so an agency's baseline plan that they're always comparing their new plans to is the plan that was in place as of January 2022. So for CDOT, that's our 10-year plan that was adopted in 2019. They compare emissions between the two plans using travel demand models and emissions modeling software, and I'll talk about that more in detail later. But these reduction targets that you see in the table were established through several sets of scenario modeling with the goal of establishing aggressive but achievable targets. The targets that were eventually settled on were determined through what we call this layer cake process, where each level builds upon and makes the previous level stronger. So the 3 layers that helped us determine these reduction targets are adding more travel choices to the network, specifically active transportation, then building upon that with transit choices, and then ultimately supporting that with dense land use. And it's through the combined effect of these layers that the greatest reductions in emissions are achieved. Next slide, please. So this slide depicts a very simplified version of all the technical work that goes into determining compliance with those reduction targets. This process I'm showing you, agencies do twice, as I've mentioned before. You do it once for your baseline plan, and then you do it again for your new plan that you're hoping to adopt. So first, agencies use their respective travel models to analyze the travel impacts of the transportation network in their boundary and any future projects. And the travel model produces a bunch of outputs, but most relevant to this analysis is VMT, vehicle miles traveled, any congestion on those roadways, and any changes in vehicle speed on those roadways. Agencies then use EPA's MOVES model to calculate the emissions impact from those outputs from the travel model. MOVES is the software that's used for demonstrating compliance with air quality conformity. And MOVES considers things like the age of the vehicles on the road, the mix of the vehicles, how many trucks, vans, motorcycles, as well as what fuel are those vehicles using. Notably, this rule does not allow any agency to take credit for a reduction that may occur because of electric vehicles or other clean fuels. What that means when you're doing this calculation process is that you are assuming the same number of EVs are on the road for your baseline run as for your modeled run, because we're not going to take credit for EVs. We're trying to take credit for the infrastructure that we're investing in. So together, these two technical processes, which I've simplified rather crudely, provide the total transportation emissions within each agency's boundaries. And so again, with this rule, you're always comparing your new plan to your old plan and seeing whether you meet the reduction targets. Next slide. This summarizes sort of the administrative process that occurs. So CDOT and the 5 MPOs will develop their long-range planning docs. For CDOT, that's our 10-year plan and our 4-year prioritized plan. For the MPOs, that's their regional transportation plans and TIPs if they're in a non-attainment area. Then they must determine the emissions that result from these plans using the process I described earlier, and then compare the emissions results from the baseline plan to the new plan and see if they meet the reduction levels. If they do, you're good to go. If not, next slide. There are 3 options available. You can go back and revisit your plan and the mix of projects in that plan and rerun your model. You can also implement what's called mitigation measures and develop a mitigation action plan to quantify greenhouse gas emissions outside of the model. And this process is all guided through CDOT's Policy Directive 1610. Or the third option is that you can choose not to follow either one of those options and accept funding restrictions. So the commission will require CDOT or an MPO to spend certain funding streams only on projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. You can request a waiver in that scenario as long as the project does not increase emissions, but it's just based on agency priority and need. That has not yet happened to date. Next slide, please. So PD 1610 is the document that guides and sets up the parameters for all things mitigation measures in the context of the rule. The policy directive was first adopted in June of 2022. We've updated it 3 times since then, the most recent time being June of 2023. And mitigation measures are defined in the rule as non-regionally significant projects that reduce greenhouse gas. And they're best understood as projects and strategies whose greenhouse gas and travel benefits can't be either accurately or easily captured in a travel demand model. Some mitigation measures are projects that are really too small to put in a travel demand model or really too impossible to put into a travel demand model. So roundabouts, that's not going to be able to go into a travel demand model. A lot of bike infrastructure cannot be modeled, or like parking policies of setting parking minimums can't be modeled in a travel demand model. So these strategies are put into PD 1610, provided with calculation methodologies for how to calculate the benefit of pursuing those strategies. So if you do need to rely on mitigation measures to comply with those reduction levels, you have to develop what's called a mitigation action plan, and you have to submit it to the commission, and the commission then evaluates any mitigation action plans for their sufficiency and merit with CDOT GHG program staff support. Next slide. So what types of projects are in PD 1610? So there are many approved measures found in the policy directive, but they include bicycle infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure, e-micromobility, transit, and some operational improvements such as roundabouts or signal retiming. Next slide. The PD also includes transportation demand management strategies like van pool, car share programs, telework, and others. While most of the strategies associated with reducing emissions in the rule work by reducing single occupancy vehicle trips, we do allow agencies to take credit for medium and heavy duty diesel vehicle replacement with hybrid and electric and renewable natural gas vehicles. Notably, agencies can also take credit for parking management strategies, things like reducing or eliminating parking minimums and setting maximums, as well as land use strategies, which are a key part of PD 1610. Next slide. So when an agency is subject to the greenhouse gas rule, which typically occurs when they're updating the regional transportation plan or doing a big update to an applicable planning document, they will conduct all the technical analyses that I've described on the previous slide and then develop a greenhouse gas transportation report and submit it to this commission for your consideration. Those greenhouse gas reports are required to have a summary of the analysis that was done, documentation of the modeling that was done to support that analysis, and then if needed, a mitigation action plan demonstrating how they met those reduction targets. Prior to submitting that greenhouse gas report to this commission, they will provide APCD with the technical data that's contained in the report for review and confirmation verification. And then following a presentation from an agency on their greenhouse gas report, this commission will consider accepting through resolution that the reduction levels have been met by the agency within that report. Next slide. Just wanted to speak a little bit about what's happened so far and what's coming in the future. With regards to the MPO actions, DRCOG, North Front Range, Grand Valley, and Pikes Peak have all submitted compliant greenhouse gas transportation reports that have been accepted by the commission. Pueblo is expected to submit their first report potentially at the end of this year or early next year. North Front Range is expected to bring a new report for an update to their 2050 RTP and their TIP in the next couple of months. DRCOG will also be submitting a new report probably early 2026 for a major update to their 2050 RTP. Next slide. With regards to CDOT, we submitted our first greenhouse gas report in the fall of 2022. And with this current statewide planning effort underway, we will be soon required to update our 10-year plan and then thus triggering the requirements of this greenhouse gas rule. Notably, CDOT is responsible only for the emissions outside the MPO boundaries. So the projects incorporated into CDOT's 10-year plan from the TPR plans that are outside the MPO boundaries will be the ones that determine whether we do or do not hit our emission reduction targets. Next slide, please. So the greenhouse gas rule has been really top of mind during the current statewide planning process. We know that the regional plans will be able to best support CDOT's ability to comply with the greenhouse gas rule by ensuring that Coloradans have appropriate choices, as many choices as possible to get to the destinations they want. We've really been emphasizing development of bike and ped infrastructure where appropriate, as well as transit enhancements where appropriate, based on regional and community needs. The goal is to prioritize projects in the regional plans that provide true transportation choice and help with achieving the reduction levels in the non-MPO areas. Next slide. That's the end of my presentation today. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to me, but we can also take questions now.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Jones.
Thanks so much for that presentation. I was just curious if any of the challenges that we're seeing around funding, either at the state level or at the federal level for multimodal transportation choices, are likely to create challenges for implementation.
Go ahead, Darius.
Yeah, I think it's always a difficult challenge for any type of for implementation of any of our programs because there's just not enough funding to go around for any of that stuff. One of the potential areas that could be that could help is taking a look at some of the other enterprises in order to help some of our agencies, our local partners implement multimodal transportation in the North Front Range in the Denver area. There is, of course, the non-attainment enterprise, which can help with active transportation and transportation options. There is the Clean Transit Enterprise, which is setting up potential calls for projects in the near future. So there is potentially some other options in taking a look out there, and we're trying to see what we can do to help stretch that dollar, because that is going to be a potential it's still going to be an issue as we kind of take a look forward, but there are some potential options out there that we want to make sure that we have available when we're taking a look at that. Is just not just our 10-year plan, but the entire program that we have available at CDOT, including things like transportation alternatives, that grant program that may be coming up in the future.
Go ahead.
Oh, thanks for that. I'm glad to hear that there's some options available, because obviously this is really important. I also was curious, I noticed the land use sort of option and how it sort of amplifies potential emission reductions. And I'm just curious, as you look at the implementation of local governments as they implement some of the recent state legislation around land use, whether or not you see that as a growing opportunity, or how just your assessment of how that's going.
Yeah, that is a potential opportunity as we take a look at how that is being implemented throughout the state and being taken looking at especially in neighborhood centers, in non-MPO areas, and how that can support active transportation and transit options as we take a look at potential project needs and potential needs throughout the state. So when new opportunities come about, that's definitely one of the potential criteria that we'll be taking a look into the future.
Any others? I will tell you there was Darius was there, a really interesting presentation at DRCOG. This was yesterday, and they're trying to identify the specific measures needed to meaningfully reduce VMT, for example, or vehicle hours delayed. And they're finding that, land use alone isn't significant. You have to combine it with, it needs to be transit focused, first of all, and you need to combine it with appropriate transportation strategies. And they were trying to tease out which of those was most effective, which of those combinations. So really interesting. I mean, I can send you a link if you're interested in that packet. So thank you. Okay, anything else? All right, well, I think we're close. We're at the end of our agenda. Herman, unless there's something else, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Okay, let's do it. Go. Like that. Thank you all. Oh, wow. We caught up there. You were right.